Chapter 1747. Above Hyun Ying's head, a small sword appeared. Its primordial spirit was small and narrow, and its cold light was extremely sharp. It was quite similar to the supreme emperor sword that he had chosen. Jin Shun let out a deep roar. His thick curly hair danced, his face was solemn, and his aura was very domineering. Two primordial spirits floated around him. On the left was a golden divine pagoda, exuding the power of the ancient bloodline. It was the main soul of the Kim people. On the right was a heavy giant sword. Its appearance was mighty. As the 9 layers of emperor rings spun out from the bottom of Jin Shen's feet, a majestic aura filled the martial arts arena. His spirit was obviously stronger than Hyun Ying's, and he was about to break through the realm of Tao validation. He might only be an opportunity away from the true self-emperor realm. If Jin Shun succeeds in obtaining the sword and understands the nirvana Tao in the sword, it might not take long for him to reach the true self-emperor realm. Qin Hao thought. Prince Chun of the Warring States period's cultivation had reached the peak of Tao validation. The power of Tao validation could not be strengthened any further. The next step was to break through the realm. There were not many emperors in the 5 realms of the East Continent who could achieve as much as Jin Shun. The two people's spirits entered the sword. In an instant, the monstrous radiance of the weapon fell down. The pain was like the waves of the ocean. Wave after wave of bombardment swept through, invading the soul and flesh. Jin Shun and Hyun Ying's Tao validation aura continued to weaken. But soon, as time passed, 2 sword whistles came from midair at the same time, resonating with their sword spirits. The sharp killing sword and the imperial sword turned into a beam of light and fell, overlapping with the sword spirits of Hyun Ying and Jin Shun respectively. The sword spirits merged and replaced the will of the original owners. Hyun Ying's master, Prince Chun of the Warring States period, succeeded in obtaining the sword. At this moment, there was a burst of joy in the martial arts arena. The disciples of the Juying Sword Palace and the people of the Warring States period were all excited. Everyone could feel the changes in Hyun Ying and Jin Shun. Like Makamanji, they were weakened because of Dilly, but their aura was deeper. Great! Jin Shun shouted as he grabbed the Imperial Power Dragon sword in his hand. His eyes were filled with love, as if he was looking at his most beloved woman. Even though the process of retrieving the sword was too painful and he wanted to give up, in the end, he managed to restrain himself and grit his teeth. Now, not only had he obtained a supreme emperor weapon, but he also had a large amount of martial Tao moral of the Nirvana realm in his mind. If he was given time to carefully comprehend it, he was very confident that he would be able to break through the shackles of Tao validation and ascend to the true self-emperor realm. Congratulations, Jin Shun. Hyun Ying smiled. With a thought, the sharp killing sword in his hand turned into a sword light and entered his body. This sword had already become an Emperor Fate weapon. You should get one too. What's there to be envious of? Jin Shun replied cheerfully. The sword of imperial power had also been refined into the body of an imperial emperor. He was content with this trip to the divine city of the ruins. Next, it was time to strive for good fortune for his people. It's true that I got the imperial sword, but I'm still some distance away from you. Because of Qin Hao, Hyun Ying and Jin Shun did not speak politely and completely treated each other as if they were on the same side. Don't be modest. With your senior, Brother Ju Ying, leading the way, and the martial Tao moral of the seniors in the sword, after this trip out of the ruins, it will be a piece of cake for you to break through to the true self-emperor realm. Jin Shun laughed heartily. The two flattered each other and returned to Qin Hao's side to express their sincere gratitude. If Qin Hao had not repeatedly urged them to hold on to their Tao hearts, they would not have been able to withstand the waves of indescribable pain and torture. If they could not withstand it, the danger could be imagined. At this moment, the martial arts practice field was filled with jubilation. Only Makamanji was not happy. Hyun Ying and Jin Shun had also succeeded in getting the imperial sword. However, the figure in front of them who was standing on the sword lotus and bathed in the supreme sword light had not made any progress. Not only was there no progress, More and more cracks appeared on Sho Wuck's sword lotus. His figure was also becoming more and more blurred, like a floating remnant soul that would scatter at any time. Makamanji's eyes became more and more worried. There were several times that he could not help but want to rush forward and drag Sho Wuck out of the sword light. We can only trust him now, Qin Hao said quietly. They had been friends for more than 20 years. From the time they set foot in the southern region until today, they had gone through many twists and turns together. Wuck, like Xiao Guo and Xue Han, had also become the closest person to him. This was the first time that Sho Wuck had forcibly refined the elements of the Barren Era without Qin Hao's help. It was extremely dangerous. Qin Hao did not dare to guarantee that if Sho Wuck failed, he would not be able to preserve Sho Wuck's cultivation. At most, he could only save Sho Wuck's life. However, although the risk was high, the opportunity was also great. Once Wuck succeeded, he would inherit the power of the all-encompassing gold. It was equivalent to being reborn, just like Qin Hao at the blood pool at Duanlong Cliffs. It was a great opportunity to rewrite destiny. However, Qin Hao did not tell Sho Wuck about this opportunity in advance. This was the only thing that made Qin Hao feel guilty. If he had told him, what would Jinshin do? The arrow was already knocked on the bowstring and had to be released. There was no turning back. He could only trust Wuck. Makamanji was silent. The martial arts arena also quieted down. Everyone's eyes were focused on Sho Wuck. They watched as his sword lotus gradually split and shattered. At this moment, even Hyun Ing and Jin Shun could faintly feel that the golden sword will that Sho Wuck was enduring was somewhat different from theirs. It was similar to the Nirvana will pressure, but they could not tell exactly what was different. Time passed day by day. The sun could not be seen in the ruins of the Divine City, but it was still daytime. No one knew how many days had passed. Just as the Wind Emperor and Meng Yu were cursing outside the manor, unable to leave and unable to take their swords and unable to bear it any longer, there was suddenly an earth-shattering explosion from within the manor. A ray of Emperor Qi gradually dissipated. Wuck! Makamanji clenched his fists wildly. Blue veins crawled up his neck as he let out a cry. He watched as the sword lotus disintegrated. His nephew's body was swallowed up by the golden light. Makamanji's heart seemed to have been pierced by the sword will. How could this be? Yishui Han could not believe it. Zhang Yu was also extremely shocked. Had he died just like that? Sho Wuck's talent in the way of the sword was unparalleled in this generation. Even the Divine Palace, where geniuses gathered, he was definitely one of the top geniuses. He could compete with Ning Tianxing, Qingji Han, and Xiao Han. However, he had died in the divine burial ruins. Qian Ning, Qin Yun, Chen Wanqin, Ah Ku, and Feng Qianli, who came from the Divine Palace, all looked sad. The golden sword was so terrifying. Even with Sho Wuck's talent, he could not conquer it. The unparalleled genius of the way of the sword had actually died here. Jin Chen's expression was bitter. They were only one level away from proving the way of the sword, but their fates were so different. Out of the 4 people who had tried to retrieve the sword, 3 had succeeded. However, the youngest junior had died tragically. It was really heartbreaking. Hyun closed his eyes. He felt as if his heart had been pierced by thousands of swords. Just like Makamanji, he had never imagined that Sho Wuck would die under someone else's sword will. He remembered that his senior brother had spoken highly of this junior. He had said that this junior was born for the sword. In the future, he might be able to create an era of the way of the sword in the divine wilderness. He would lead the sword cultivators of the world to an unimaginable peak. However, his senior brother would never have thought that the junior he spoke highly of would eventually die under the way of the sword. Don't be rash. Wuck's will of the Emperor has not completely disappeared. Look carefully. Qin Hao's palm pressed down on Makamanji's shoulder. His 5 fingers almost sank into the other's shoulder blade. With the divine implement, the great void cauldron, Wuck's soul should not have been wiped out, let alone his emperor body. The process of retrieving the sword was still ongoing. It was not over yet. At this moment, the golden light in front of them fell down and drowned everything. Sho Wuck's sword lotus collapsed, and he was swallowed up. His aura could not be felt. Only the terrifying will of the sword filled the world. However, Qin had to not lie. In the endless golden light, Shou Wux's will of the Emperor was indeed emitted. His will of the Emperor had not dissipated. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The surging golden threads fell down like a torrential downpour. There was no place to hide. In the golden threads that covered the sky, Shou Wux screamed from his soul. His natal sword spirit had been destroyed. The pain was unimaginable. Moreover, he felt that the power of rules that he was born with was constantly being eaten away by the golden threads until it was completely wiped out from his soul. At this moment, no words could describe the feeling he was experiencing. It was as if even death had become an extravagant wish. However, Shou Wux did not want to die. Moreover, there was an incomparably holy light that wrapped around his soul. Its power was terrifying. It was even more domineering than the falling golden light. No matter how many threads attacked, they could not penetrate the divine light and shatter his emperor's will of the emperor. It's this. A small purple gold cauldron floated in front of Shou Wux. It rotated slowly. When the pocket-sized cauldron was imprinted in his eyes, it became incomparably majestic. In the haze, Shou Wux seemed to see an unparalleled demon god. He could not help but want to bow down and worship it. What was this thing? The power it contained could be said to be incomprehensible. At least, Shou Wux had never seen any emperor's weapon in the world that could be compared to this divine cauldron. Qin Hao must have sensed the power of the golden light. That's why he gave such an important thing to me. In an instant, Shou Wux understood. Qin Hao did not take the sword out. With the ability of the number one person in the divine palace, it was not impossible for him to let Shou Wux inherit it. Qin Hao must have great expectations. How could Shou Wux let him down? So, what if I don't have a sword spirit? So what if I lose my natural rules? Because I am the sword. As if sensing Head Wux's conviction, the great void cauldron's radiance dissipated, exposing his soul to the outside world. Head Wux continued to press forward, heading towards the end of the all-encompassing golden light. He had to replace the figure meditating at the end and become the controller of the golden light. Swish, swish, swish. Sharp golden lines fell. Strangely enough, when the originally dangerous rays of light passed through Shou Wux's soul, there was no trace of pain. Moreover, his soul was not penetrated. All the rays of light were like streams of water that all merged into the soul, constantly strengthening Shou Wux's will of the emperor. His aura, which had gone from strong to weak and was on the verge of death, suddenly became strong again. A swordsman should not fear the waves and press forward with indomitable will. Junior, you have passed the test. Remember my name, True Extreme Sword Emperor. This sword is called True Extreme. Swoosh, swoosh. Amid the ear-piercing sword whistling sounds, an old and indistinct voice seemed to reach his ears. Soon after, the golden threads that covered the sky disappeared, and First Flawless eyes lit up, and he returned to reality. Buzz! A sword fell from the top of his head. It was so fast that it surpassed the distance of space. In a flash, it disappeared and sank into Shou Wux's head. At this moment, monstrous sword will exploded in the manner. Shou Wux's body was wrapped in dazzling golden light. A golden lotus of the Great Path was reborn and bloomed under his feet. It rotated slowly, and the golden petals emitted boundless emperor's light. It was as if one petal could cut through the world. Chapter 1748. In the void, the sound of swords whistled, and millions of sword intents appeared. All of them flew towards Shou Wux. Streams of sword light merged into the great Tao golden lotus, and some even entered his body. The entire sword city seemed to have been resurrected. Sword light flashed everywhere, and the sword intents in the city seemed to have been summoned. They covered the sky and the sun, and all of them fell into Shou Wux's body and merged with his monarch soul. Everyone was shocked when they saw this scene. Every sword intent in the city merged with Shou Wux, and the power of his divine soul grew a little stronger. When millions of sword intents merged into one, Shou Wux's sword intent was terrifying to the extreme. At this moment, the great Tao golden lotus under his feet was incomparably huge, like a lotus fortress. The pressure caused the entire sword city to tremble. There's actually such a thing. Jin Shin gasped for breath. After the sword soul collapsed, it reformed, and the sword intent was even stronger than before. Is this the sword desire rebirth? At this time, the great Tao golden lotus bloomed with an indescribably dazzling light. As the sword intents in the city continued to gather, the lotus grew bigger and bigger. The petals slowly folded, turning into a huge golden cocoon that enveloped Showuk. Above the golden lotus, dazzling sword light flickered. It was so dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes, including Qin Hao. His 10,000 spirit fire eyes couldn't withstand the flowing sword shadows of the golden lotus. He couldn't look directly at it all. He could only feel that the power of the Tao in the golden lotus was rising crazily. What a terrifying sword Tao oppression. My body feels like it's being torn apart. Emperor Yuan of the various forces struggled to hold on. Even if the sword intents in the city didn't take the initiative to attack, it still made them feel extremely uncomfortable. Yi Shuihan, Qin Yun, and the others were stunned. Jin Shan resisted the oppression, and his brows furrowed tightly. The sword intent was too strong. When they took the swords, why didn't they trigger the sword intents of the entire city? But Showuk did it. They wondered how strong this kid's cultivation would be after he merged with millions of sword intents. Makamanji was absent-minded for a long time before a smile slowly blossomed on his face. It seemed like his nephew had obtained a great opportunity. He had come back from the dead and reconstructed his sword soul. The process was truly hair-raising. Qin Hao's heart finally calmed down, and a smile appeared on his face. Showuk did not disappoint him. Based on this situation, he had successfully taken in the 1,000 elephant metal as his origin spirit, and the desolate element and the sword lotus had merged into one, forming a brand new sovereign spirit. Wong. In front of him, the lotus flower that had turned into a golden eggshell finally stopped moving. The sword will of the entire sword city gathered within it, becoming nutrients for Showuk's life spirit. At this moment, as the petals unfurled, the reborn Showuk finally appeared in front of everyone's eyes. His long hair was disheveled, and a faint golden halo flickered around his body. His pair of eyes, which were already as sharp as swords, contained an extremely sharp golden splendor. At first glance, one would feel as if one's soul had been pierced, and it was filled with a strong sense of threat. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, the platinum sovereign rings were released continuously. When the 9th sovereign ring appeared, Showuk's aura and sword will had reached the pinnacle. He wanted to be reborn, and he had become a sovereign lord. He actually broke through. At the entrance of the manor, the celestial cliffs and the wind people were all here. At this moment, Meng Cliffs saw Showuk's 9 sovereign rings, and his face gradually turned ugly. The supreme imperial weapon must have a will inheritance left behind. Zhu Ying's disciple is in the 8th plane of the way. It is not surprising that he can become a sovereign lord after obtaining the sword, the Wind Emperor said. Although his words were like this, they sounded especially bitter. That was supposed to be my opportunity. Damn it, damn it. Feng Gaoshi gritted his teeth and said. Feng Gaoshi gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. If his eyes could kill, he would have killed Duwuk a million times over already. He had entered the burial god ruins to break through the 9th plane of the way and become a swordmaster. He had been waiting for an opportunity until he entered Sword City. Who would have imagined that not only would Li Chusan secretly set him up, he would even be defeated by Showuk on the spot, causing him, the #1 sword cultivator in the Eastern continent, to suffer a stain in his life. Moreover, Showuk had even snatched away the fortune that originally belonged to Feng Peerless. How could he not hate him? He couldn't wait to turn him into ashes. Let's go. Jin Shun is here. Besides, they have another sovereign lord. They can't touch the sword sect of the South region for now. We have wasted too much time. Let's meet up with the Sky Shaker clan first. We will not forget this. After the Wind Emperor finished speaking, he left with his hands behind his back. The Wind People followed closely behind. Feng Gaosher clenched his fists and looked at Shou Wuk with hatred. Then he turned around and left. Mengya left with the Wind People. Now, Sword City had become a dead city. The sword will in the city had become the nourishment for Shou Wuk's advancement. There was no longer any danger. This ancient city shone for the last time for the sake of a peerless sword cultivator. How was it? Qin Hao stepped forward and asked. At this moment, he felt a faint pressure from Shou Wuk. Jiao Wuk smiled and moved his emperor's intent. Golden sword shadows whizzed out, covering the sky and covering the earth. They were densely packed. The entire world before everyone's eyes was filled with golden light. The beams of light were cold and oppressive. It was like they had fallen into a boundless world of swords. So powerful. Jin Shen's face was filled with astonishment as he looked at the countless golden sword shadows. They were neither sword chi nor the emperor's sword will. When he touched one of the golden lights with his finger, he flicked it, and the sound of a sword resonated in the air. These were real swords. So exaggerated? Hyun Ying's heart trembled violently. Thousands of golden lights were real swords. They looked like they were made of pure gold. This was something he had never seen before. When a warrior entered the Emperor realm from the Sovereign realm, although the Emperor will could condense into a weapon, it was only similar to a physical object. It was not a real weapon. At most, it was just a trick. For the weak, the Emperor was too strong. They could not tell it all. First, the swords formed by the flawless emperors were all corporeal. This was simply too ridiculous. I do not know what they are or what material they are made of. As long as my emperor will activate the sword's souls, they will appear. They are no different from real emperor swords. As long as the emperor will is not exhausted, I can have as many as I want. Who wants to try their strength? Shou Wuk smiled at Yishu Han and company. What a black-bellied guy. Yishu Han shrank back. Qin Yun, Feng Qianli, and Qianning took a step back at the same time. Don't bully us because of our low cultivation realms. If you have the ability, try it with boss. Xiao will pointed at Qin Hao. Forget it. I don't want to try. Qin Hao was not afraid. Forget it. He was indeed a little weak. The myriad gold and red lotus fire were on the same level. Their realms were similar, and neither Dao could suppress the other. If they really fought, it was hard to tell who would emerge victorious. Ha ha! Shou Wuk laughed heartily for the first time. He had never laughed so brazenly and arrogantly in his life. He raised his hand and threw the great void cauldron to Qin Hao. Anyway, thanks. This item is not bad. I wonder if you have more. If you do, why don't you store one with me? No, Qin Hao replied coldly. What was a cauldron? It was a divine artifact, and there was only one of it. What? Did your nomological powers change? At this moment, Makamanji asked with concern. With the sword lotus reconstruction, Dao could condense into real emperor swords. Had the laws changed? It's a secret. Shou Wuk smiled mysteriously. At present, he did not know what the laws contained in the golden beams were. He needed actual combat. However, from the looks of it, no one present was willing to fight him. Qin Hao did not want to fight either. It was really lonely. You little brat. Mu Yunzong let out a long sigh. No matter what, the greatest fortune in Sword City this time belonged to none other than his nephew. He had proven his Dao as a great emperor, and his sword soul was reforged. With a single thought, he could summon tens of thousands of emperor swords. Just this ability alone was something that not many great emperors who had proven their Dao could withstand. As for whether the rules had changed, even if there were, they should have been strengthened. Thinking of this, Makamanji secretly glanced at Qin Hao. This great fortune was given to him by Qin Hao. We've obtained the emperor weapon, and the sword will in the city has disappeared. Let's go, Jinshin said. Everyone nodded at the same time. They had gained a lot in Sword City, but there were more treasures waiting for them in the ruins. Shou Wuk turned around and faced the ruins of the manor. He bowed deeply and said, Junior Wuk thanks Senior for giving me the Sword Jinji. From today onwards, my insignia will be Sword Master Jinji. Hey, your sword has a name? Hyuning was surprised. Why didn't his sword have a name? Prince Chun and sect leader Mu did not mention the name of the emperor weapon either. Of course I do. The true extreme sword. Showuk stepped on the ground and leaped into the clouds. Swoosh! Swoosh! The sword sect of the southern region, the Sengoku Kim people, the Juying Sword Palace, and the Shueiyao Holy Palace formed a mighty force that left the Sword City and flew deeper into the ruins. And where they went, Qin Hao sensed the power of the beginning through the great void cauldron. The emperor weapons of the buried god ruins were like stars in the sky. Every location contained a massive amount of supreme treasures, causing many influences to fight over them. At the end of the river, there was a resplendent divine temple. Incomparable beams of light interweaved with each other, sealing off the entire plain, forming one area after another. It was like countless houses were separated. The interior of the beams of light was filled with all kinds of emperor weapons and magical treasures. They were dazzling and could be called the treasury of the mortal world. Countless forces were attracted by the light of the treasures and gathered here one after another. The eastern border of the East Continent, the Devil Luo Empire. One of the overlords of Penglai, the sky-shaking Ho race. West region, Yuntian Palace, sky-trampling sect. The Lihua Palace in the north region, the Ghost Baron Empire in the middle region. All the forces were attracted by the light of the treasures. Looking at the countless supreme treasures floating in the sky, all the overlords were stunned. There are so many of them. Song Yao was shocked. Even though he had grown up with emperor weapons in his mouth, he could not suppress the shock in his heart now that he had become an imperial lord. Streaks of spatial light intertwined. Platinum emperor pills, ancient books, all kinds of weapons, everything that could be found in the outside world could be found here. Moreover, every single one of them exuded a powerful emperor's aura. These beams of light are not simple, Yuan Shirtao said and looked up solemnly. The sky-shaking Ho race was not the first to arrive. Overlord Moro, sky-trampling sect leader, and Yuntian Palace Master were one step earlier than them. However, none of the forces moved. They must have tried, and it would not be easy to take them. I'm testing for the Imperial Lord. A rogue cultivator who followed the Ho race team said. There were many emperor weapons, so he should have a share. Be careful, Yuan Shirtao said. The rogue cultivator, Emperor Yuan, nodded heavily. Then he stepped into the sky and reached out to take a red fire-long staff. Just as his palm was about to pass through the beams of light, an incomparably turbulent emperor light suddenly swept out. The red fire-long staff erupted with terrifying flames. A shadow of the staff fell and struck the rogue cultivator's head, turning him into nothingness. Chapter 1749. Supreme Monarch Weapon. Yuan Shirtao's face darkened as he stared at the sky. Emperor Yuan had died, and the staff shadow retracted back into the crimson fire staff. The flames burned even more fiercely. The lone cultivator who tested the water wasn't very strong. He was only a second-tier Dao, proving realm cultivator, but his divine soul couldn't escape from the staff. The will of Wei in the staff was extremely fierce. It was definitely at the supreme level. Song Yao's face darkened. There were many overlords here. No one fought for it. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but these monarch weapons were too powerful. Of all the choices, you chose the supreme monarch weapon. One overconfident clown. Overlord Moro sneered. His family didn't get close to Qin Hao, but it didn't mean that they didn't recognize Dendi. A few years ago, the Gui clan tried to kill Li Chuji several times. Yuan Shirtao went to the Mountain of Dao to capture him, which touched the Moro clan's bottom line. If Qin Hao hadn't given orders, Overlord Moro would have sent troops to the East Sea. He wouldn't have let the Sky Shaker clan off so easily. If you don't have enough cultivation, why don't you leave? You're embarrassing yourself. At this time, another voice sounded. It was especially harsh in the ears of the Sky Shaker clan cultivators. Yuntian Palace Lord. Yuan Shirtao's face darkened. He looked in the direction of the voice and saw a group of powerful cultivators in white. In front of them was a middle-aged man in a sky cloud robe. He was looking at Yuan Shirtao with a smile. It was the Yuntian Palace, the overlord of the middle world. Excluding the War God Temple and the Daqin Empire, The orthodoxy of the middle world of the East Continent was undoubtedly the strongest. The fact that the Yuntian Palace could stay as the overlord of the middle world for thousands of years was enough to show its strong foundation. Every generation of Yuntian Palace Lord was a genius among geniuses. Yuan Shi Dao had been a ninth-tier Dao, proving realm cultivator for many years and was about to become a true self-great emperor. However, he didn't have the confidence to defeat the Yuntian Palace Lord. My Sky Shaker clan is not talented, and our imperial path is not as profound as the middle world's heavenly cloud palace. Why don't we ask Palace Master Yin to demonstrate how to obtain the treasure and broaden our horizons? Or perhaps, even you cannot do it? Song Yao said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Although his words were flattering, his words were not respectful at all. Obviously, he was not convinced. You think I can't do it? Palace Lord Yun's eyes narrowed slightly. His pure white divine robes fluttered even though there was no wind. He stepped into the air and grabbed one of the Emperor's weapons. Majestic Emperor's will and precepts surged from his palm and extended into the spatial beam. Seeing this scene, Yuan Shi Dao and Song Yao sneered at the same time. If a second-stage Dao Vindication cultivator couldn't do it, what would the result be if a Dao Vindication Emperor Lord took action? At this moment, all the overlords focused their attention on Palace Lord Yun. It was rumored that the current Palace Lord Yun's cultivation had reached the pinnacle of the way, and the next step was to enter the realm of true self. What's more, no one had succeeded in obtaining the Emperor weapon so far, so they didn't know what mysteries the light beam that sealed the space was hiding. Song Yao had obviously encouraged Palace Master Yuntian to make a move, allowing others to probe the danger. For the other forces, this was not necessarily a bad thing. Wong. The air vibrated and surged with golden-white Emperor's light. The two Dao wills collided violently. Palace Lord Yun grabbed a pearl. When his palm passed through the spatial beam, the imperial pearl inside burst into a blazing light. Although the pressure was not as strong as the Crimson Fire staff, it was enough to make many emperors change their expressions. Palace Lord Yuntian's cultivation was indeed amazing. 9 emperors' rings bloomed from the soles of his feet. The power of the pinnacle of the way forcibly resisted the pressure and held the imperial pearl tightly. However, his palm could pass through the spatial beam, but he couldn't pull it out. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't pull the imperial pearl out. In the end, he could only give up and return to the ground. Amazing. Palace Lord Yun's emperor's path is amazing. Many emperors said in admiration. Even though he failed to obtain the treasure, Palace Lord Yun endured the backlash of the emperor weapon without any injuries. Which imperial lord present could compare with his cultivation? It's very strange. The light beam that sealed the emperor weapon is tough and powerful. It can't be broken or refined. The more power that surges in from the outside, the stronger the sealing force of the light beam becomes. It's like being trapped in a quagmire. This wasn't the first time Palace Lord Yun tried this. Before Song Yao and Yuan Shi Dao arrived, he tried to attack the two emperor weapons separately. Just now was the third time, but the result was exactly the same. It's the power of the array. Only the power of the array can have such an effect. If we want to obtain the Emperor weapon, it seems that we have to first break the array formation formed by the light beam, said an Imperial Lord. His entire body was covered in a pitch-black robe. His face wasn't covered. His face was bumpy, and there were many spots on it. His nose bridge was sunken, and his eyelids were as small as a mouse's. He looked quite ugly. He was the Imperial Lord of the Ghost Baron country. Once I find a way to break the array formation, I will be able to obtain whichever Emperor weapon I want. Palace Lord Yun snorted softly. He raised his head and stared at the Emperor weapons with his sharp eyes. He knew that Song Yao was deliberately provoking him, but he didn't care. He showed off his cultivation in public to deter the younger generation from snatching the treasures from Yuntian Palace. Anyway, it was only a matter of time before he broke the spatial beam. Yuntian Palace took all the Emperor weapons here. All the forces present quieted down. After witnessing Palace Lord Yun's process of taking out the treasures, they realized that it wasn't impossible to take out the treasures. The key was to break the array formation. Another thing to note was that the Dao intent contained in the Emperor weapons varied in strength. Those who were weak in the Dao-proving realm had to be careful not to touch the powerful supreme treasures. Otherwise, the Sky Shaker race's wandering cultivators would be the best outcome. After a long period of silence, all the overlords were carefully observing. There were also a few array monarchs who were proficient in array Dao who tried to break the array formation. One of the forces paid a high price to hire an array monarch who came to the conclusion that they might be able to break the spatial beam by force and take out the Emperor weapons inside. In the end, this conclusion caused the death of a few Dao-proving realm experts. As time passed, more and more forces arrived. The planes became more and more chaotic. However, there were some who found a small way to break the spatial beam. Buzz, buzz. Two Emperor lights approached from afar and landed on the plains, revealing two powerful groups. Wind Monarch Lord and Meng Yaozhu left Sword City and were attracted by the treasure light. Along the way, they obtained some small opportunities and finally met up with the Sky Shaker race. However, their expressions were not good. It was as if they were filled with anger. Especially Feng Gaishi, who was cursing. His anger was written all over his face. Song Yao, saw Wind Monarch Lord and sneered inwardly. He must have been angered by someone. When they first entered the World Gate together, due to the uneven distribution of treasures, the Wind People Sword Cultivators and the Sky Shaker race were not on good terms. Later, Wind Monarch Lord was attracted by the soaring sword intent in Sword City and separated temporarily. He thought that after leaving, the Wind People would not return. However, he was angered and remembered his allies. Senior Feng Gaishi, who bullied you? Song Yao walked up and asked with concern. Although he was disgusted, since they were back, there would be many places where he could use the Wind People. Don't mention it, it's all. Feng Gaishi was about to tell Song Yao about what happened in Sword City. Swish, 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 swish. High up in the sky, streaks of resplendent sword light shuttled back and forth. Sword shadows whistled through the air, and the scale of the scene was extremely majestic. The hearts of the various overlords trembled slightly as they raised their heads to look. Soon, many sword rays landed on the plains, revealing many figures. The overlord of the Western Realm, the Kim people of the Warring States period, Jin Shun, an extreme Dao, confirming expert. Middle Realm, Jueying Sword Palace, Junior Brother Jueying, Sword Master Hyuning. The Southern Region's Sword Sects, Dao, proving Emperor, Makamanji. There were also Li Chuji, the Southern Taoist sects, Tribulation, Sword Emperor, and the Fairies of the Sacred Palace. The appearance of 4 overlord forces at once really shocked all the experts present. However, they weren't wary or fearful because of this. The plains were filled with treasure light, and there were quite a number of overlords who had rushed over. Currently, there were no less than 10 overlords gathered here. It wouldn't be surprising if there were 4 more. Everyone else was calm, but Song Yao's nerves were tense. No wonder Feng Junfei and Feng Gaishi showed up in such a cowardly manner. Were they beaten by Li Chuji? Father, His Excellency is here. Mo Xian leaned towards the Moro Emperor and said softly, "Do what we need to do. Don't let others see anything." The Moro Emperor transmitted his voice. Without Denda's order, the Moro clan was absolutely loyal to the East Continent. The exit to the outside world was guarded by the direct descendants of the War God Temple and Han Lingxian. If they weren't careful, they would end up in a miserable state. Mo Xian nodded calmly. He moved his gaze away from Qin Hao and focused on breaking the light beam formation in midair. Good heavens, is this the treasury of some god? Jin Shin was shocked by the sea of Monarch weapons. It was so dangerous to enter the Sword City, and the clan only got 1 supreme Monarch weapon. Now, they didn't have to worry about not having enough to share. Before entering the God Burial Ruins, this is definitely unimaginable in the outside world. Makamanji's shock was no less than Jin Shen's. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Look, Xian Ying pointed to the surroundings. The overlords of the East Territory, Middle Territory, North Territory, and the 5 territories were all gathered. Looking at the situation, they were all trying to obtain the archweapon. Clearly, no one had succeeded. "Big brother, I want that black bell." Sayo was stared at a huge black bell in midair. It was extremely heavy. He didn't know what it was used for, but its power was extremely strong. Yi Shuihan, Qin Yun, Feng Qianli, and the others all had spirited eyes. The dazzling array of emperor weapons was like a world's treasure trove. They didn't know which one to choose. Even Elder Tian Yun from the Saint Palace was gasping for breath. Too many. Empress Shui Yao really had the foresight to find Li Chuji to lead the team. Otherwise, the Monarch weapons would have no fate with the Saint Palace. "Quiet, don't disturb him," Shou Wuk said in a deep voice. Others were still thinking about how to get it, but these guys were already thinking about how to divide it. It was as if it already belonged to them. What do they think Qin Hao was? A tool to take it? Shou Wuk finished scolding, but his eyes were looking at all the Monarch lights in midair. He shook his head repeatedly, as if he wasn't satisfied with any of them. None of them had an aura comparable to the purple gold cauldron. Failed products, they were all failures. "Mr. Li, how many can my Kim people take this time?" Jin Chun rubbed his hands. Since Sengoku recognized them as friends, Qin Hao shouldn't treat them badly. "It's not easy to take them. Let me observe first. If my mood suddenly becomes better, I might take them out." Qin Hao's words stunned Jin Chun. Jin Chen's eyes widened. "How can I make Mr. feel better? This is not easy." Qin Hao sighed, and his eyes fell on Song Yao and Yuan Shirtao. Jin Chen seemed to sense something and also looked at Han Tian clan. 3 years ago, Han Tian clan attacked Dao Mountain to capture Mr. In my opinion, it was the biggest joke in the world. The great-great-grandson of Han Tian clan fell into the sea and drowned. Mr. Ko was the one to blame, which made me very angry. Prince Chun, Donghai rumor Yuan Shirtao, is approaching the true self-emperor realm. It's not easy to deal with him. Qin Hao said. "Humph." Jin Shin snorted and strode forward. He stood in front of Monarch Han Tian and said, "I'm Jin Shun from the Warring States Kingdom in the Western world. I'm here to see Monarch Han Tian's burying Heaven Imperial intent." Thump! Yuan Shirtao's heart skipped a beat. What was this? Chapter 1750. Qian Xin Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation stand out if you don't agree. There were many experts in the 5 realms of the East Continent, but Jin Shun was not an ordinary person. His cultivation was strong enough to be ranked among the first-rate monarchs. Yuan Shirtao had heard of the monarch, overlord of the West Continent, for a long time. It was said that he was a battle maniac. He did not expect that Jin Shun would suddenly challenge him. There were many artifacts here, and all the overlords were trying to obtain them. Was Jin Shun out of his mind to challenge him? Monarch Han Tian overlord ignored me and looked down on the Kim people. Then I will show no mercy. Boom! A violent monarch aura burst out as the 9 monarch rings under Jin Chen's feet spun. The surging monarch light swept across the land and struck toward Yuan Shirtao. Wait, I did not look down on the Kim people. Yuan Shirtao's expression changed as if he was facing a great enemy. He was not allowed to explain it all. Under such circumstances, he had no choice but to fight back. The 9 monarch rings bloomed under his feet as Dilly circulated his body. The blood in his body surged as he punched forward. In an instant, the space was shaken by a whale's roar. A huge battle whale appeared under his fist, aggressively swallowing everything as if it was going to swallow Jin Shin whole. Buzz! Jin Shin punched out. The powerful fist aura penetrated the space and condensed into a heavy sword spirit, piercing into the whale's mouth. The 2 Imperial Masters' wills clashed in a frenzy. Everyone saw the sword light wreaking havoc in the whale's body like flashes of calamity. The whale's body continued to be torn apart as terrifying sword aura emerged. Boom! 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 A series of explosions sounded between Jin Shun and Yuan Shirtao. The battle whale's body was shattered as endless sword chi whizzed out and blasted on Yuan Shirtao's body. His body suddenly burst out with the monarch light of Bury the Sky, blocking the sword chi. However, his legs were frantically pushed back as the blood in his body surged violently. Song Yao's eyes flashed with a sharp light as he stepped forward, wanting to enter the battle. "You'd better be quiet and not move." A threatening voice sounded in Song Yao's ears. Following that, a figure appeared out of thin air in front of Song Yao. His temperament was extraordinary, and his body was like a sword. He stood upright, blocking Song Yao's path. It was Shou Wuk. "It's you." Song Yao recognized him. Before the ruins were opened, inside the heaven-shaking palace, this person had appeared together with Li Chuji. They had protected the ants of the northern frontier in western Liang, and had even made a move. "You think you can stop me?" Song Yao had an impression of Shou Wuk's swordsmanship, but using the strength of an 8-stage Dao-confirming cultivator to contend against a Dao-confirming Emperor Lord, Shou Wuk really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. "You can try." Shou Wuk circulated his Emperor's will, and 9 Emperor's rings appeared beneath his feet. The aura of a Dao verification sword master could be seen clearly. Song Yao's expression changed slightly. He was promoted to sword master so quickly. Silently glancing at the Wind People, he saw that Feng Gaishi's face was ashen, and his eyes were filled with rage. At this moment, he finally understood what was going on. This swordsman who followed Li Chuji had probably taken advantage of Feng Gaishi's opportunity. Humph! Feng Gaishi clenched his fists, and a flame of jealousy rose in his heart. He wanted to go up and help. "Just watch," Wind Emperor transmitted. The Wind People originally had a grudge against Li Chuji. In order to prevent Zhuiying's sword palace from occupying the resources of Sword Dao, the Wind People had approached Song Yao. In fact, they were also using him. But along the way, 70% of the benefits had gone to the Guis. Feng Junfei was very unhappy. He also knew that Song Yao actually wanted to use the Wind People to deal with Li Chuji. The two sides were just using each other. Now that Jin Shun was suppressing Yuan Shirtao, he would sit back and watch as their hatred deepened. This would prevent them from becoming enemies later on. The Sky Shaker clan didn't put in effort, but Feng Junfei wasn't easy to deal with. In the field, Jin Shun and Yuan Shirtao's battle was getting more and more intense. No matter what the reason was, they seemed to be serious. Song Yao was blocked by Shou Wuk. A Dao verification sword master was enough to make him not dare to enter the battle. He originally thought that the Wind People would stand up for the Sky Shaker clan, but seeing Feng Junfei's indifferent attitude, he obviously underestimated this old fox's cunning. "Jin Shun, don't be too arrogant," Yuan Shirtao shouted angrily. He was in a frenzy and didn't care who his opponent was. At this time, his body was surrounded by gray, cursed Emperor's light. The sky burying will in his body resonated with the great path. The void was dark, and the sky seemed to be sinking, bringing with it a suffocating pressure. "You bastard! I, Jin Shun, admire your clan and want to learn a few moves from you. You've looked down on me again and haven't used your full strength. How hateful!" Jin Shun's expression was incomparably furious, as if he had suffered a great injustice. "You arrogant bastard! I'll let you experience my true strength." Yuan Shirtao roared again and again. He was so angry that he couldn't bear it anymore. He raised his palms, and the sky burying will in his body whizzed out. Muffled thunder rolled in the void and cracked the sky. Immediately, countless sky-burying steels fell down and drowned the sky, burying Jin Shen's head. "You should have done this from the start, stingy bastard." Jin Shen scolded and looked up. The sky-burying will in the void sealed him, and he had nowhere to hide. He felt the pressure, but that was all. There was no need to hide at all. With a shout, Jin Shen clenched his 5 fingers into the void. Boom, boom, boom. The void seemed to collapse, and the space was distorted. A 9-story divine pagoda fell from the sky, suppressing heaven and earth. Dazzling Emperor's light illuminated the whole world. Even the sky burying will was suppressed. The gray airflow was pierced and kept melting. Destroy. Yuan Shirtao's emperors will exploded to the limit. The blood in his body roared. He pointed his palms at the sky and pulled. With a rumble, the sky-burying steels fell crazily. Huge sky-burying stones covered the god-burying plain, trying to bury this part of the world. Jin Shin sneered and pointed his finger upwards. The 9-story divine pagodas will rumbled. Dazzling golden emperor's light shone from each floor until it reached the 8th floor. To deal with Yuan Shirtao, Jin Shin's 8-story divine pagodas was enough. As for using his full strength, he was not worthy. Whoosh! As if the world was shattering, endless light radiated from the divine pagoda, piercing through everything. Countless sky-burying steels were annihilated, disintegrating under Jin Shin's will. Puff! Yuan Shirtao vomited a mouthful of blood. He desperately wanted to swallow it back, but he could not control it. The Gray Emperor's light around his body began to weaken. His aura weakened and his face turned pale. At this time, he looked up at the 9-story divine pagoda in the void. The divine pagoda fell and stopped above his head. It was as if Jin Shun could kill him with a single thought. Monarch Hantian's face was full of sorrow. Overlord of the Western Realm, your cultivation is indeed extraordinary. Palace Lord Yun said solemnly, with an exceptionally solemn expression. Not only the middle realm of the East Continent, but even among the overlords of the 5 realms, there were only a few monarch lords that he could take seriously other than the supreme old ancestors. And Jin Shin's strength made him feel pressured. That's enough. Bullying others without restraint. Does Prince Chun think he's invincible? There are so many monarch lords present. I'm afraid they won't accept it, Monarch Feng said coldly. Yuan Shirtao was already injured. He could not allow Jin Shun to continue his rampage. It's none of your business. Do you want me to spar with you? Jin Shun looked at Feng Junfei impolitely. Unconvinced? It didn't matter if others were unconvinced. If he wanted to beat Feng Junfei, he would not hesitate. Prince, that's enough. Qin Hao scanned the scene. There were more than a dozen overlord forces. If he was in the limelight, it would be troublesome if he provoked everyone's anger. I haven't had my fill yet. Jin Shun lazily dispersed his will. The divine pagoda on Yuan Shirtao's face also dissipated. He returned to Qin Hao's side and said, Mister, have you had your fill? Do you want to take care of Song Yao as well? Chapter 1751. A lower-grade Emperor Master with an impure Tao and relied on external forces to ascend. Aren't you afraid of lowering your status by attacking him? Qin Hao glanced at Jin Shun. Impure Tao. Jin Shun frowned slightly. His emperor sense enveloped Song Yao and felt his emperor intent. He found that Song Yao was indeed different from the other Emperor Masters. Dili's emperor intent was slightly weaker. Tisk, you're indeed a lower-grade Emperor Master. You're not worthy of me attacking you. Qin Hao smiled. Let's find a way to break the Emperor artifact first. Besides, you don't need to do anything to deal with the Sky-Shaking clan. Jin Shin was puzzled, but he didn't care. Obtaining the Emperor artifact was the main goal. Next, Qin Hao carefully observed the spatial light beam. His 10,000 spirit fire eyes flashed as if they could see through everything. He quickly found the key. Father. Song Yao stepped forward. Seeing that Yuan Shirtao was injured, he took out a Dao fruit he obtained from the ruins and handed it to Yuan Shirtao. Yuan Shirtao took the Dao fruit and ate it. He used the spiritual energy to nourish his emperor body. His fluctuating aura quickly stabilized, and he said, I'm fine. He fought with Jin Shun. Both sides seemed to be fighting fiercely, but in reality, they didn't kill each other. There were many emperor artifacts here. If they really fought to the death, it wouldn't be good for anyone. It would be a joke to the other overlords. Even so, Yuan Shirtao completely recognized Jin Shin's strength in this battle. He was very strong, not inferior to Palace Master Yin. He was probably not far from the second realm of Emperor Dao. At least, he was closer to Dao confirmation. Jin Shun is in cahoots with the Dao sect. It won't be easy to deal with Li Chuji. Song Yao clenched his fists. The Kim people of the Warring States period were very arrogant in the Western world. They never made friends with any forces because they looked down on them. Who would have thought that they would be so close to Li Chuji? Jin Shin must have been bewitched by Li Chuji to attack them. No matter how strong he is still a person. 600 years ago, Dindu was 100 times stronger than Jin Shun. What happened to him? Yuan Shirtao was not worried. Understood. Song Yao nodded his head and scanned the surroundings. The formation of more than 10 overlords was no small matter. If they could be mobilized, they could be used by the Sky-Shaking clan. At this moment, a cold smile appeared on the faces of the father and son. On the other side, after witnessing the battle between Jin Shun and Yuan Shirtao, many Thearchs felt the pressure and worked even harder to break through the light beam formation. At the very least, they wanted to obtain a portion of the archweapons before Jin Shun did. If Palace Master Siyun and Jin Shun were here, once the Kim people and Yuntian Palace solved it first, the other forces would have nothing to do with the treasure. The cultivators of the various forces took action one after another, attacking the spatial light beam one after another. Emperor's light flickered in midair, and the halos of the Great Path lit up repeatedly. It was dazzling, and it was an extremely spectacular sight. Qin Hao was also trying to break through the light beam, but his goal was not only the archweapons, but also the light beam itself. The light beam that sealed the archweapons was exactly what he needed, the void chains of the primordial 9 elements. He was thinking about how to collect the void chains without risking his life. After all, the void chains were intertwined with a large number of the archweapons, almost condensing into a whole. Every Dharch artifact contained a trace of the Tao will of its previous owner. With so many of them, if you were to forcefully collect them and trigger the Tao will, the consequences would be dire. Moreover, the spatial light beams outside were not the void chains themselves. Sir, how is it? Jin Shin was a little anxious. There were too many overlord forces, and the principle of first come, first serve was clear to everyone. It's almost done. What do you all want? Qin Hao asked the crowd. The more the better. I want all of them. Jin Shun clenched his fist in front of Qin Hao, as if he wanted to take all the treasures in the plains into his palm. Qin Hao ignored him directly. He was too greedy. He did not even want to be picky. He wanted to take everything. Too shameless. Big brother, that black bell is very cool. Sayo was said excitedly, still not forgetting about the huge and heavy black bell. Okay, I'll get it for you. Qin Hao patted Sayo's shoulder. Guadi was quite pitiful. Ever since he participated in the Northern Frontier Tournament, he had won a pair of demon-subduing pestles from Zhou Wudao's cousin. Until today, he was still using a venerable artifact. It was time to change it for him. He walked towards the black bell. The people of the 4 sects followed closely behind him like a group of bodyguards. Qin Hao stared at the black bell above. His emperor's will penetrated it, and felt the power contained in the light beam. He secretly praised Guadi for his good eyesight. He didn't know what material this black bell was made of. The pressure of the Tao was very strong, although it was not as strong as a supreme Dharch artifact, and even more incomparable to the 4 Dharch swords of Sword City. Compared to ordinary Dharch artifacts, the power of the black bell might be quite terrifying. Qin Hao bellowed as he slowly rose into the air. He was very careful. The vast plain was filled with countless spatial light rays that looked like silver threads. The sealed Emperor weapons were completely wrapped up by the silver threads. Although others couldn't see through them, Qin Hao could clearly see through them with his myriad spirit fire pupils. The light rays were quickly fusing with the Emperor weapons. No wonder no one could take them out. The void chains were endless. The stronger the external force, the stronger the rebound force. There were only 2 ways to break them. The first way was to dissolve the silk threads entangling the Dharch artifacts. But this method was extremely stupid. It would consume a lot of dilly. The weaker Emperor Yuan might die because of this. He might not necessarily take them out. The second way was to break them with external force. Thinking of this, Qin Hao pointed his finger forward. An incomparably sharp Emperor's light condensed on his fingertip. Monarchly, someone used external force to forcibly take the Dharch artifacts just now. He died very miserably. Not even his bones were left. At this time, a voice sounded. Monarch Moro couldn't help but speak. If one observed carefully, one would find that there was worry in his eyes. I know. Thank you for the reminder. Qin Hao nodded and smiled at Monarch Moro and Mo-Sien. But the sharpness on his fingertip didn't dissipate. He continued to pierce forward until it disappeared into the light beam. Chapter 1752. This. Mo-Sien was stunned. Wasn't he afraid of being attacked by the Emperor weapons? His Majesty knows what he's doing. Don't look. Sovereign Lord Moro transmitted his voice softly and then closed his eyes to feel the will of Wei in each of the artifacts. He tried to break through the artifacts with weaker pressure. Since they reminded him and Dinda still acted, he must have found the way. Maybe he could really take it out and there was no need for them to worry. When Qin Hao saw that Mo-Sien and his son were focused on the Emperor artifact, he smiled in his heart. When an external force was used to forcefully retrieve an item, it would definitely trigger the Dao will of the treasure through spatial light. He was clear about this, but it also depended on the method used. For example, by borrowing the Dao Jun ruler. The Lord Taoist ruler was forged by Xintian Peak in the Divine Palace and was under the control of Yunifeng. It was a supreme sacred artifact that specialized in breaking all kinds of formations. The spatial light in the plane was not the main body of the void chain. It was probably the weak power that overflowed from it and wrapped around all the Emperor weapons. To be precise, it was not a true formation, but it was similar to a formation. Qin Hao's 10,000 spirit fiery eyes could see through the essence of all things. This was a unique ability. He could observe the order of the intertwining light, but others could not see it. Then he activated the Lord Taoist ruler to peel it off layer by layer. Since it was not the main body of the void chain, it should be easy to break it. The reality was as he predicted. When he condensed the golden finger and secretly activated the Lord Taoist ruler, he gathered the unique power of the sacred artifact at his fingertip. Under the 10,000 spirit fiery eyes, he saw the spatial threads gradually overflow like sand meeting water. Soon, the Emperor weapons inside were exposed. However, he was not in a hurry to take them out. The process was still slow, giving people the impression that he was working hard. "Big brother, how is it? How long will it take?" Siowa asked anxiously. "Soon," Qin Hao said with a smile. His gaze shifted to the other Emperor weapons. After half an hour, "How is it?" Jin Shun could not help but ask. "It's not too difficult." Qin Hao was very confident. "Then you should get it out." Jin Shun felt as if thousands of ants were scurrying around in his heart. "It's basically a success. Why don't you try something else?" Qin Hao turned around and walked towards another Emperor weapon. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, he started to attempt to break through the third Emperor weapon. Jin Shun looked at Qin Hao. Basically succeeded? Then what was the point of this exchange? Did Li Chuji think that they were a bunch of idiots who couldn't tell? The masters from the other great forces took some time to look at Qin Hao's side, but no matter how they tried, they still couldn't break it. All the Emperor artifacts on the plains tried to break it, but the result was the same. Wong. Suddenly, a ball of light flew out. Palace Lord Yun had dispelled one of the beams of light. The Imperial armament inside shot up into the sky, trying to escape into the distance. How could the cultivators of Yuntian Palace allow the treasure to escape? Many cultivators surrounded it. Not only Yuntian Palace, but many other overlords could not hold themselves back and rushed towards the Imperial armament as well. "Do you want to die?" Palace Lord Yun's cold and domineering voice reverberated in the air as he threatened them. The masters from the other great forces who were rushing towards the Imperial armament immediately stopped, not daring to move. At that moment, a handsome young man from Yuntian Palace reached out his hand and firmly grasped the Imperial armament. It was a flying rainbow brush. The Imperial light was extremely intense, and the terrifying will of the Great Path shook the young man's body. The young man's face flushed red, and his body trembled violently. Boom! Finally, the young man was repelled, and the flying rainbow brush turned into a beam of light and quickly disappeared. Get back here." Seeing this, Palace Lord Yun clenched his fist in the distance. Majestic Imperial filled the sky as if he was controlling the world. The beam of light that was about to disappear uncontrollably rolled back into his palm. Impressive. Makamanji was shocked and praised. The cultivation of the current Palace Lord of Yuntian Palace is enough to rank among the top great emperors of the 5 realms. There are few who can defeat him, Hyuning explained. Makamanji was not from the East Continent. It's just SOSO. Jin Shan crossed his arms and looked over. The Yuntian Palace specialized in the way of the emperor. Every generation of palace lords was a genius, but he didn't know if Jin Shan could withstand a beating better than Yuan Shirtao. He was eager to give a try. It was hard to find an opponent. Qin Hao looked at the flying rainbow brush in Palace Lord Yun's hand and chuckled to himself. Was he trying to dissolve it with his Emperor Qi? It was indeed possible for someone at the pinnacle of Dao, proving cultivation, to do so. After all, the spatial light here was not strong. However, at this rate, Palace Lord Yun might not be able to do it even if he wanted to. Sooner or later, he would collapse from exhaustion. Yuan Shirtao and Song Yao were also trying their best. Perhaps they were stimulated by Palace Lord Yun, but they were working very hard and looked very anxious. "Since you are in such a hurry, let me help you." Qin Hao felt that it was about time. He glanced at Song Yao, and his imperial will shrouded the imperial armament that Song Yao was trying to break. At this moment, the red lotus fire in his body quietly circulated, and with the power of the Taoist ruler, it seeped into the imperial armament and quickly peeled off the spatial threads. Swoosh! In the next moment, a brilliant imperial light burst out, and the imperial armament flew out from Song Yao's palm. Just like before, it flew into the distance. "Stop it!" Song Yao shouted anxiously. He had actually broken it himself. He immediately chased after it, and many Sky Shaker clan cultivators surrounded the imperial armament. Almost at the same time, many Overlord clan cultivators looked at the Sky Shaker clan. Their hearts beat uneasily, as if they wanted to join in the fight. However, the Sky Shaker clan's lineup was not to be underestimated. Although Yuan Shirtao and Song Yao were not as strong as Palace Lord Yun, they were enough to make many imperial lords wary. "You can hold it in?" Qin Hao smiled inwardly. If one was not enough, he would try another. With a shift of his mind, the red lotus fell toward Yuan Shirtao. It mixed with the Taoist ruler's light and entered the imperial armament. Suddenly, another beam of light flew out and shot into the sky. Another one. The imperial lords took a deep breath and looked at the experts from the Sky Shaker clan who were rushing towards the Monarch weapon. They could not control their restlessness. Among them, there was a tall expert who was wearing a robe. He directly rushed over. It was the sect master of the Sky Trampling sect in the Western world. "What are you doing, Taoist Master Tatian?" Yuan Shirtao shouted angrily. The imperial light around him surged as he blocked the sect master Tatian. "One is enough. Why do you need so many?" The sect master Tatian snorted. His palm surged with rule well as he reached for the imperial armament. At the same time, he said, "Get lost." The fierce imperial might forced the emperors of the Sky Shaker clan to retreat. "You're courting death." How could Yuan Shirtao allow the sect master Tatian to take something from him? He definitely would not allow it. Although he did not know how it was broken, the imperial armament belonged to the Sky Shaker clan of the EC. In an instant, the two imperial lords fought in the air. A large number of people from the Sky Trampling sect whizzed up and fought with the Sky Shaker clan. The Sky Shaker clan had a large lineup for this trip. There were 2 imperial lords, and almost all of Emperor Yuan in the clan had come. In addition, they had recruited a large number of itinerant emperors. Naturally, they would not be able to deal with the Sky Trampling sect in Huaxia. However, at that moment, a dazzling imperial light suddenly bloomed in front of a direct imperial elder of the Sky Shaker clan. Even he did not know what had happened. Then, he saw an imperial armament soaring into the sky. The imperial elder of the Sky Shaker clan was shocked. He did not even touch it, but the treasure flew out of his hand. It was simply strange and unbelievable. However, since it had appeared right under his nose, it naturally belonged to the Sky Shaker clan. He reached out to grab it without hesitation. "Do you think you deserve it?" A cold and emotionless voice was heard. A mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth. Before he could see clearly who had attacked, the Imperial Elder of the Sky Shaker clan felt as if he'd been hit by a huge rock. His bones cracked as he fell to the ground. At that moment, the Imperial armament was already in the hands of Palace Lord Yun. There was a cold smile on his face. In the air, the Sky Shaker clan and the Sky Trampling clan were fighting. Yuan Shurtao and the Sky Trampling clan's sect lord were fighting crazily. Explosions sounded continuously. No one was willing to defend for the sake of the Imperial armament. Song Yao had successfully obtained the first Imperial armament, but then he saw the shameless Palace Lord Yun severely injure his own Imperial elder and steal his family's treasure. He was enraged. With a roar, the Divine King halberd appeared in his hand, and he stabbed it toward Palace Lord Yun. "Song Yao, don't overestimate yourself." Palace Lord Yun put the Imperial armament into his storage ring and said with a smile. Even though they were both Imperial lords, their Dao wills were much weaker than Song Yao's. The sharp halberd light pierced through the air. The sky burying Dao will flowed and was covered in gray, cursed Imperial light. Palace Lord Yun flicked the tip of the halberd, and the powerful dilly vibrated. It went through the Imperial armament and into Song Yao's body. Song Yao's blood boiled, and his hand went numb. His body was knocked back. "Ha!" Qin Hao smiled when he saw this. The feeling of being robbed must be terrible. It wouldn't be easy to make the Palace Lord of Yun Tian Palace spit it out. "Senior Yun, don't you think you're going overboard?" Song Yao knew he was no match for Palace Lord Yun and shouted angrily. "Since it's ownerless, it's only natural that it belongs to the capable. Young man, don't ruin your future." Palace Lord Yun replied shamelessly. If Song Yao insisted on taking it back, he would have no choice but to kill him. "You?" Song Yao was so angry that his face was trembling. He turned to the Wind people and shouted, "Senior Feng, are we allies? Who does the Imperial armament belong to?" Feng Junfei asked with a cunning expression. "Creak." Song Yao gripped the Divine King halberd and gritted his teeth. "It belongs to the Wind people." "No, I want the one in your hand." Feng Junfei pointed at the Imperial seal in Song Yao's left hand. He was fighting with Palace Lord Yun over it. Whether he could take it back was still a problem. Song Yao froze and became even angrier. "My nephew, since we're allies, you should at least show some sincerity," Feng Junfei said. Feng Gaishi's lips curled up slightly. His father was wise. Swoosh. Song Yao raised his hand and threw the Imperial seal over. The divine halberd pointed at Palace Lord Yun coldly. "Two Imperial lords. Are you going to return it or not?" Palace Lord Yun's face darkened. He looked at Feng Junfei coldly. "Brother Feng, don't do anything stupid." "No, it's a misunderstanding." "Brother Yun, this is a huge misunderstanding. As the saying goes, a gentleman uses his mouth and not his fists. I just want to persuade you to stop and be a kind person. If you're really shameless, then there's nothing I can do." Feng Junfei replied. Poof! Blood flowed down Song Yao's throat. He almost fell to the ground. Was this the sincerity of the Wind people? What sincerity? They were even more despicable than old Crook Yun. "Father, I really can't bear to see Brother Song Yao's people being bullied," Feng Gaishi said as he looked at the heaven-trampling sect members flying in the air. Go. Since we're allies, we naturally have to do our part and help." Feng Junfei said righteously. "Yes." Feng Gaishi took the order and led the sword cultivators of the Wind people into the sky. Beams of wind and sword aura pierced through the chaotic battle. Even though he had promised to help the Sky-Shaking clan get back one item, it might not be in Palace Lord Yun's hands. Yintian Palace was too powerful. In comparison, it was much easier for the Wind people to deal with the heaven-trampling sect master on his own. Chapter 1753. The battle was in full swing. Three the arch weapons of the heaven-shaking clan were unsealed one after another. One was taken by Palace Lord Yin. One fell into the hands of the Wind People. As for the last one, Yuan Shirtao and Sect Master Tatian fought fiercely over it. Qin Hao looked on calmly, as if it had nothing to do with him. Palace Lord Yin had personally injured the Emperor Elder with the highest cultivation level of the Heaven-Shaking clan. The rest of them were caught in a battle with the Heaven-Trampling sect. Emperors were dying one after another. In this battle, the Heaven-Shaking clan was caught off guard and suffered heavy casualties. The Sky-Trampling sect also suffered some damage, but it wasn't too serious. The Sky-Trampling sect of the Western world was proficient in a type of sky-trampling technique, and it was extremely powerful when used together. The sect members formed a sky-trampling formation and resonated with each other's Tao will, seemingly condensing into a single entity. They stomped down at the same time, and an unparalleled Tao might descended from space. The lower-level Emperor Yuan was directly killed by the Tao might, and even someone as strong as Tsang Yao's nephew, level 6 Emperor Yuan Swan and I, was also shaken to the point of vomiting blood. None of the Overlord forces were weak. In particular, the strength of the Heaven-Trampling sect's sect master made Qin Hao view him in a new light. His cultivation wasn't any weaker than Yuan Shirtao's. Even though there was a difference in numbers, the Heaven-Trampling sect was able to hold the Heaven-Shaking clan back with the power of one sect. The more the battle went on, the more serious the casualties of the Gue clan became. More than 10 Emperor Yuan died in total, and their overall strength was reduced by nearly half. However, this advantage did not last long. As Feng People's sword cultivators entered the formation, the pressure on the Heaven-Trampling sect increased. They gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. Feng Gaishi was at the peak of the 8th tier path, Proving Realm. His strength was below the Imperial Lord level, and few could withstand him. No one in the Heaven-Trampling sect could match him. Wind People really know how to pick the best time to take advantage of others. Jin Shin said indifferently, "It's normal. Ask our Master Yun is too powerful. Feng Junfei is not confident. The Sky Shaker race has suffered heavy casualties. They need the Wind People's help." Hyuning looked at Qin Hao with a strange expression. "Sword Master Hyuning, why are you looking at me?" Qin Hao smiled and gazed at him. "I'm fine." Hyuning withdrew his gaze. The 3 Monarch weapons had broken out of the Heaven-Shaking clan's formation. Was it due to luck, or had someone secretly tampered with them? He didn't believe that Song Yao and Yuan Shirtao had solved it. Even if they had the ability, they shouldn't have solved it so quickly. Moreover, what was the explanation for the 3rd Emperor artifact? Could it be that a Tao-confirming stage 8 Emperor Elder was stronger than the Emperor Lords of the various forces? Hyuning believed that the Heaven Shaker race had been tricked. If he had to point out who had the greatest motive, it would naturally be the Tao sect's calamity, Sword Emperor. However, was Qin Hao really capable of breaking the seals of 3 Emperor artifacts in a row? You must be Taoism's Emperor Li, right? Qin Hao turned his gaze over and saw a group of people slowly approaching. They were all wearing the same flame-colored robes, and all of them exuded a tyrannical aura of fire. North Territory, Lihua Prefecture. Dinder recognized them. Lihua Prefecture in the North Territory had inherited a unique type of Tao fire called Beiyang Lihua. It was very powerful and had the reputation of being the #1 fire sect in the East Continent. Its status was on par with the Blazing Sun Temple in the South Territory, or even better. However, whether the fire of the temple or the Beiyang Lihua was stronger would only be known after the battle. Emperor Li, I'm honored that you know our Lihua Prefecture. An old man with fiery red hair and beard smiled. He was the Emperor Lord of Lihua Prefecture. Beiyang Lihua is the best in the East Continent. Taoism in the South Territory has admired it for a long time. May I know what business you have with me? Qin Hao asked. Old man has cultivated the Tao of fire for 1,100 years. At my age, I'm still in the Tao proving realm, so I don't dare to call myself a genius. However, after so many years, I still have some knowledge of the Tao of fire. Just now, I sensed that 3 Tao fire auras had descended upon the Sky Shaking clan. Although I don't know what happened in the middle, the three Emperor artifacts immediately broke the seals, and the Tao fire auras came to you. Emperor Li, what do you think of this? Emperor Li was said with a gloomy smile. Could it be that you think I've broken the three Emperor artifacts? Qin Hao said calmly. Although he said so, his heart trembled. Did this old man sense it? Lihua Prefecture in the North Territory was indeed something. It lived up to its name of being the #1 fire sect. Old man can't say for sure whether Emperor Li has broken the seals or not. However, I think you should have some special methods to break the Emperor artifacts, right? Emperor Li was said. Jin Chun, Hyuning, and the others' expressions changed. An overlord expert naturally wouldn't say such strange things. Could the person who had broken the three Emperor artifacts of the Sky-Shaking clan really be Li Chuji? The Taoist ancestor knew that he could reverse yin and yang and overturn the universe. No one in the East Continent could rival him in the art of divination. Li Chuji had cultivated with the Taoist ancestor. Although his life spirit didn't have the power of divination, he naturally knew the trick. The best proof was that he had taken the sword from Sword City. It seems that old man's guess is right. Emperor Li Hua saw the expressions on Jin Shun and the others' faces and was certain of his guess. May I know what your intention is? Qin Hao's eyes gradually turned cold. He couldn't hide it anymore. Since Emperor Li is so capable, why don't we work together? Emperor Li Hua said. Li Chuji had the Juying Sword Palace, the Kim people from the Warring States period, the Southern Region Sword Palace, and the Water Jade Sacred Palace. Their strength couldn't be ignored. With the addition of the Lihua Prefecture, this lineup almost made up half of the overlords present. Even if they want to take all the treasures in the plains, why not? Not everyone can work with me. Qin Hao said coldly. Even if he didn't care about the treasures, he had to consider the Sacred Palace and Tsiogwa. Emperor Li, are you looking down on the old man? The Lihua Prefecture Lord squinted his eyes and said coldly, Tell me, if all the forces here knew that Monarch Li could easily break the seal of the Monarch weapon, what would they do? Moreover, I heard that your relationship with the Sky-Shaking clan isn't good. Are you threatening me? Qin Hao's eyes darkened. It's not a threat. Isn't it better to work together for mutual benefit? Emperor Li was said. May I ask what kind of cooperation is considered? Qin Hao said. Emperor Li will protect the Lihua Prefecture. You can break the seal of the plane as you wish. However, the old man wants 40% of the Emperor artifacts. Emperor Li Hua smiled. 40%? Jin Chen's face tightened. He stepped out and blocked Emperor Li Hua's path. He looked down at him and said, You have a big appetite. The Sacred Palace, Sword Sect, Sword Palace, and Kim people would split the remaining 60%. Each of them would take 10%, while the Lihua Prefecture would take 40%. Was he trying to rob them? Prince Chen's Emperor Dao is tyrannical. If you want to take 40%, the old man has no objections. Of course, the Lihua Prefecture will take 40% first. Emperor Li was said indifferently. Was 40% a lot? He was already very generous that he didn't ask for 50%. After all, in that situation, he might face the danger of being attacked by the remaining overlords. You can get lost now. Jin Chun waved his hand and asked the Emperor Lihua Prefecture to leave. Emperor Li, do you want to consider it? Emperor Lihua looked at Qin Hao. Prince Chen's intention is my intention. Qin Hao said. It wasn't impossible for them to work together. The Lihua Prefecture hadn't taken any risks yet. Why do they want 40% of the Emperor artifacts? Moreover, Qin Hao hated being threatened the most. In his previous life, he survived the joint attack of the 10 overlords, Emperor Yuan. Now that he was in the God Burial Valley again, how could a mere Lihua Prefecture be qualified to threaten him? Take care. Emperor Lihua coldly snorted and turned to leave. He didn't want them to work together. There were more than 10 overlords in the plane. Some of them were partners. For example, Yuntian Palace, Skyshaker race. Chapter 1754. I'm afraid that old man Li Hu will cause some trouble. It's not good for you. Hyuning said to Qin Hao. Wuk was nurtured by Master Juying and the Three Swords. He's considered half a disciple of the Sword Palace. If he's in danger, the sword master won't stand by and do nothing, right? Qin Hao looked at the cultivators of the Sword Palace with a smile. The cultivators of the Sword Palace chuckled helplessly. Even without mentioning Shou Wuck, the archweapon in Sword City was enough to make them stand firm. Li Chuji had underestimated the character of the Sword Palace. Uncle Mu, let's go all out and do something big. Qin hadn't hide anymore since he'd been exposed. Each of my emperors will have one. Makamanji's eyes flashed with fighting spirit. If this battle continued, many disciples and elders of the sect would die, but it was worth a try. No problem. Qin Hao nodded. The Kim people can't be treated worse than Sect Master Mu. Jin Chun clenched his fists, and fierce archlight raged between his fingers. If Palace Master Yun intervenes... Qin Hao paused. Don't worry, he'll be a dead man. Jin Chen's eyes were full of murderous intent. The limit of proving the way? Let's see who's the real limit of proving the way. Qin Hao looked at the people around him. They were all full of fighting spirit. The Sword Sect, the Sword Palace, the Kim people, and the Shueiyao Sacred Palace. Qin Hao's identity was equivalent to Empress Shueiyao's presence. The fairies of the Sacred Palace followed his lead. The four forces were united, and none of them would back down. The battle between the Sky-Shaking clan and the Sky-Trampling clan ended very quickly. Feng Junfei stood there without moving. He kept talking to Palace Lord Yun without any intention of fighting. Seeing this, Song Yao gave up on taking back the Emperor weapon from Yuntian Palace. He changed his target and joined Ma Yintao's side with the Divine King Halberd. The father and son worked together to defeat the leader of the Sky-Trampling sect. Song Yao had also reached the perfected level. Even though his Dao was slightly weaker, he was still the Archlord. After all, Yuan Shirtao's combat power was extraordinary. There was no way the sect master of Heaven Trampling sect could defeat them alone. He had no choice but to give up and retreat with his sect members, watching the Dharch weapon fall into Yuan Shirtao's hand. Out of the three Dharch artifacts, the Sky Shaker race managed to keep one in the end. However, 14 Dharch Yuan and more than 20 top-notch human sovereigns died. Old bastard Sky Trampler, Yuan Shirtao, will remember this. Yuan Shirtao placed the Emperor artifact into his storage ring. Looking at the team that had shrunk by nearly half, he wanted to cry, but had no tears. Song Yao glanced at Feng Junfei coldly and then at Palace Master Yin. If it weren't for Feng Junfei, the family wouldn't have ended up like this. The Wind people didn't lose a single soldier and got an Emperor weapon for free. If you want to fight anytime, do you think I'm afraid of you? The Sect Master of Heaven Trampling sect replied coldly. The Wind people had messed things up, and many of his sect members had died in this battle. He wouldn't have stopped if it weren't for the fact that both sides were destroyed. After all, there was a grudge between them. The Dharch artifacts haven't been unsealed for so many days. Why did the Sky Shaker race suddenly break the seals of 3 Dharch artifacts? Don't you think it's strange? At this moment, Lord Ming, Yi said casually as he looked at Qin Hao. In Sword City, the life-seizing technique allowed one to enter the city without injuring anyone, which left a deep impression on everyone. With the conflict between Li Chuji and the Sky Shaker race, how could he not cause trouble? It seems like there are still people with discerning eyes. I also find it strange. To be honest, before this, I went to a Sword Dao city with Master Mengya. Feng Junfei spoke slowly and explained everything that had happened in Sword Dao City in detail. The Qilin Dao sect in the south was good at life-seizing techniques. Li Chuji cultivated with the Ancestral Lord, so he was even better at life-seizing techniques. Whether he was the one who did it or not, Li Chuji had worked with Jin Shun to exclude the Wind people in Sword City. The Sky Shaker race must have dug a hole for Li Chuji. Life-seizing techniques and heaven secrets? Palace Lord Yun frowned. According to Feng Junfei, if Li Chuji could take people safely to avoid the Sword Will, then he must know how to break the plane's Dharch artifacts. How can you believe such nonsense? Qin Hao denied. I'm afraid it's not nonsense. The moment the Dharch artifacts were unsealed, Old Man sensed the power of 3 flames of the way descending and seeping into the arch artifacts in front of Lord Song Yao and Lord Ming Tao. The next moment, the seals were broken, and the source of the flames of the way came from Lord Li. "Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe Lord Li didn't do it, but isn't it too much of a coincidence?" Old Man Li Hua said loudly with a sinister smile. His voice spread among the various forces. "It's you." Song Yao stared at Qin Hao with sharp eyes. Hearing this, he recalled that the situation of breaking the seals of the Dharch artifacts was indeed very strange. It was as if the Dharch artifacts had broken through on their own. "Lord Li, please explain to everyone." Old Man Li Hua stroked his fiery red beard. "Lord Li, is what Lord Li Hua said true?" Palace Lord Yun asked. If it was true that Li Chuji had broken 3 Dharch artifacts in a row, could he break all the Dharch artifacts of the plane? Yuntian Palace would never allow that. At that moment, Sect Master Taishan's gaze also fell on Qin Hao. Everyone from the Ghost Baron Kingdom, as well as Mo Xian and his son, were all looking at him. Mo Xian had a look of disbelief. Was it really done by His Highness? The divination technique can peek into the secrets of the heavens and break the Dharch artifacts. If you all really think so, then I have to admit it even if I don't want to. Qin Hao smiled faintly. Facing the gazes of the Thearchs, including Lord Mengya, Emperor Feng, Sect Master Tetian, Palace Lord Yun, and the Ghost Baron Dharch, he was not afraid at all. "Li Chuji, you will pay the price for this." Yuan Shitao's eyes were bloodshot. The Dharch light on his fist flickered wildly. He held the sky-shaking hammer tightly and gradually approached. Song Yao held the King of Gods halberd in his hand and surrounded Qin Hao with the remaining emperors of the Sky Shaker race. Originally, they wanted to kill Qin Hao, but they couldn't think of a way. Who would have thought that Li Chuji would counterattack and kill them in advance? Although most of them were independent cultivators, they couldn't die in vain. "Thief, I advise you and your son to behave yourselves." Jin Shen took a step forward with a sullen face and stood in front of Qin Hao. The aura of the peak of Tao attainment from his body was extremely oppressive. Yuan Shidao stopped in his tracks. In the previous battle, Jin Shen's strength made him wary. "Jin Shen, today's matter is no longer a conflict between the Sky Shaker race and the Tao sect. He can solve all the Dharch weapons by himself. Isn't he taking the overlords seriously?" Palace Lord Yun's body slowly rose to the same height as Jin Shen. The 2 Dharch auras of the peak of Tao attainment confronted each other. "What does it have to do with you? If you have the ability, you can solve all the Dharch weapons too." Jin Chen replied bluntly. "Do you really want to team up with Li Chuji?" Palace Lord Yun's eyes darkened. Behind him, Emperor Feng and the others floated up one by one. 8 or 9 overlords stared at the people of the sacred palace with unfriendly gazes. Not only Jin Shun, but also my Jueying Sword Palace, the sword sect of the southern region. Makamanji and Hyun Ing, 2 Dharch rings of Tao attainment bloomed. 9 sword rings swept out under their feet, and the sound of swords rang faintly in the void. For a moment, the plain space was completely silent. Chapter 1755. The Sengoku, Kim People, Jueying Sword Palace, Southern Territory Sword Sect, Water Jade Saint Palace, and Western Liang were all forces that could not be underestimated. There were already 5 Emperor Realm Masters. No wonder Emperor Li is so fearless. With the support of so many Emperor Realm Masters, you want to take all the Emperor artifacts here? This behavior is too disrespectful to the other Emperor Realm Masters. How presumptuous. Old Man Li Hua obviously wanted to make Qin Hao a public enemy. He did not forget to observe Palace Master Yun's expression after he finished speaking. "My grudge with the Sky Shaking Clan has nothing to do with you. Why is Palace Master Li Hua so humiliating and forcing others into a dead end?" Qin Hao glanced at Old Man Li Hua and said to the others, "There are many Emperor artifacts on the plane, and there should be even more in that artifact hall. Since none of you can crack it, why don't you let me do it? As the saying goes, those who see have a share. This Li does not want to take it all for himself. How about we become friends?" Fighting for Emperor artifacts was not worth it. Although Qin Hao was not afraid, it was best not to fight without hurting the people of Sword Sect. Many Emperor Realm Masters were surprised. Li Chuji had the ability to break the seal and did not want to take it all for himself. It seemed that he would give some to other forces. Since that was the case, it was not good to make things difficult for him. Moreover, Jin Shun and Hyuning were not just for show. Emperor Li is so kind. How do you plan to divide it? Palace Master Yun asked. All the Emperor Realm Masters became serious. That's right. How should they divide it? No one wanted to take less. That depends on your personal relationship. Qin Hao replied. He would naturally take care of those he was familiar with. As for those he was not familiar with, like Yuntian Palace, it was fine to give away one or two. The Sky Shaking Clan and Wind People did not get a share. Does that mean you have the final say? Palace Master Yun's face sank. If Palace Master Yun can also crack all the Emperor artifacts, will you let others make the decision for you? Qin Hao found it ridiculous. Immediately, all the Emperor Realm Masters' faces turned cold. They were obviously not satisfied with the distribution. I have a suggestion. Old man Li Hua laughed. Everybody looked over. Li Hua said, let's divide the Imperial weapon into 3 parts. Great Emperor Li's side will take one, and the other forces will take the other. Do you have any objections? What about the other one? Jin Shen asked. Of course my Li Hua Manor will take the 3rd share. Old man Li Hua said. Jin Shen laughed coldly. Old man Li Hua was truly shrewd. He was too good at dividing. Old man is only making a suggestion. If Monarch Li disagrees, why don't you listen to Asgard Master Yun's opinion? Old man Li Hua laughed. The appetite of the Yuntian Palace might be even bigger. Li Hua Manor will get 20%, Yuntian Palace will get 20%, and the remaining 60% will go to all the sovereign lords present. Does anyone have any objections? Palace Master Yun scanned the area. The Sky Shaker tribe, the Wind People, the Desolate Ghost tribe, the Celestial Cliffs, the Sky Trampling Sect, and the Demon Luo Empire each got 10%, excluding Qin Hao's side. Naturally, I have no objections. Song Yao was the first to step forward with the God King halberd in hand. But the prerequisite is to take down this person first. The Wind Monarch pointed at Qin Hao from afar, his eyes gloomy and terrifying. The scene in Sword City would repeat itself, but Jin Shun and the others who helped Li Chuji would not get a single thing. Sigh, if Monarch Li knew this would happen, he would not have rejected Old Man. Now, it's too late for regrets. Old man Li Hua's Tao flames surged as his surroundings turned into a terrifying world of lava. Everyone, are you ready for a battle? Qin Hao's 10,000 spirit fire pupils flashed as monarch rings slowly bloomed from beneath his feet. Ha ha, this is great. Jin Shin looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. He could start a massacre without restraint. Makamanji, Hyuning, and Shouwuk took a step forward at the same time, standing side by side with Qin Hao and Jin Shun. The auras of the 5 sovereign lords surged forward. Wait, I also want 10% of the Emperor treasures here. Suddenly, a voice came from the void. Then, a figure appeared in the space. An expert with a ghost mask and 2 blades on his back appeared in front of everyone with a large group of Lu Island warriors. Monarch rings were released from beneath his feet. He had reached the peak of the Tao, proving realm, and had 9 levels of Monarch rings. It was Hidden Blade who was disguised as a man. Dong was Sovereign Lord. Palace Master Yun was surprised and looked at Hidden Blade with disdain. He was not the only one. All the East Continent forces present did not like the warriors of Lu Island, even though they had never been attacked by Lu Island. After all, Daqin and Lu Island were just across the sea and had been fighting for thousands of years. Even so, the innate nature of the East Continent people made the sovereign lords instinctively hate Hidden Blade. A while ago, I was forced by this person to eat the mother and child soul, devouring parasite of the West Continent Miao tribe. If I help you kill him, can I get 10%? Hidden Blade shouted. Mother and child soul, devouring parasite. The sovereign lords of the East Continent were shocked. They were not unfamiliar with the parasite poison of the Miao tribe. Don't worry, I have successfully forced the parasite out. It can't affect me at all. He underestimated the arts of the Ing continent. Hidden Blade's tone was full of hatred. "Since you have helped me, you should get 10%. Palace Master Yun heaved a sigh of relief and no longer looked at Hidden Blade with disdain. The fact that he could force the soul-devouring parasite out of the Meow tribe was enough to prove that his cultivation was extraordinary. Moreover, if they did not agree to help the pirates, they would be in big trouble if they joined forces with Li Chuji. Palace Master Yun nodded and gave Old Man Li Hua and the others a look. He obviously would not fulfill his promise to Hidden Blade. The pirates of Lu Island did not deserve to be on the same level as them. It would not be too late to kill Hidden Blade after they took down Li Chuji and defeated Jin Shun. Haha, even the heavens want to kill you. Die. Song Yao shouted and stabbed the divine king halberd toward Qin Hao. The sky burying Luna's body rumbled like thunder. As soon as he moved, all the forces in the field attacked at the same time. The dozen overlords of the plains were now divided into two camps. Qin Hao's camp consisted of 4 forces and 5 sovereign lords. However, the opposing forces were the Yuntian Palace, the Sky-Trampling Sect, the Wind People, the Heavenly Cliffs, the Ghost Region, the Lihua Palace, the Sky Shaker Clan, the Lu Island, and the demonic Luo Empire. The 9 forces had 11 sovereign lords in total. The Sky Shaker Clan had 2 sovereign lords, Song Yao and Yuan Tao. There was no doubt as to which side was stronger. The Yuntian Palace had the absolute advantage in terms of numbers and quality of sovereign lords. Palace Master Yun's personal strength was not inferior to Jin Shen's. More than 100 rays of sovereign qi were released. The scale was extremely spectacular. The entire sky of the plains was trembling violently. The Sky Shaker clan wanted to kill Qin Hao the most. First, there was the hatred of Fong, then there was the hatred of the Dao sect, and then there was Qin Hao secretly killing them. They had suffered heavy losses, and half of their sovereign yuan had died. This had already shaken the foundation of the Ji clan. This was all thanks to Qin Hao. If they couldn't kill Li Chuji, Yuan Tao and his son would be too ashamed to return to the Eastern Sea. Secondly, the Wind People and the Heavenly Cliffs also hated Qin Hao and the Sword Sect of the Southern region. Feng Gaishi thought that Shou Wuk had taken his opportunity to become a sovereign lord. He would take it back the same way. Just cripple him. Don't kill him. Palace Master Yin shouted. Li Chuji could control yin and yang and pry into the heavenly secrets. If they wanted to crack the sovereign weapon of the plains and enter the divine palace, they would have to rely on him. Obviously, they couldn't kill him directly. The sovereign lord sneered. They all knew that Jin Shun, Makamanji, and Hyuning could all die. Only Li Chuji had to stay alive first. After cracking the sovereign weapon, they would then chop him up and feed him to the dogs. Boom, boom, boom. Beams of Emperor's light bombarded in the void. Flowing light that blotted out the sky shrouded the top of his head. The Emperor's might seemed to sweep across the entire world, mixed with destructive power. The heaven-burying will, the northern sun-Dao fire, the sword-light gale, and the horizon divine mountain. Each and every one of these Daos pressed down on Qin Hao, as if they could bury and tear him apart. Chapter 1756. Qin Hao stood in the air, his clothes fluttering. There was a ribbon wrapped around his right arm. It was the Imperial Rainbow Ribbon. He grasped the Imperial Rainbow Ribbon, and the Dao might in his body exploded. The Red Lotus demonic flame spread over the Imperial Rainbow Ribbon. The ribbon seemed to burn and turned into a long whip of flames. Sword sacrifice, Hyuning shouted. Bright sword light bloomed from his body and gathered into a killing sword. It was the divine soldier from Sword City. Makamanji, Jin Shun, and Shou Wuk all took out their divine emperor swords. The gentleman's sword and the imperial power sword in their hands were majestic and oppressive. Shou Wuk's body became blurry and was wrapped in a blinding golden light. He seemed to have turned into a golden sword light with an extremely sharp aura. Whoosh! The 4 swords attacked at the same time, at the same speed. They moved side by side and pierced towards the imperial emperors. The divine king halberd in Song Yao's hand stirred up a violent sky-burying Dao will. Midway, he felt a golden sword flash in front of him. With a ding, the divine king halberd collided with it, causing a turbulent airflow. "You have to get past me first." The golden sword shadow was sharp and unstoppable. Showuk's voice came from it. "You are a mantis trying to stop a chariot." Song Yao naturally recognized the voice. He waved his halberd and cut through the space, slashing out a turbulent moonlight. "If you want to touch Li Chuji, you have to get past Showuk first. How can a newly proven Imperial Emperor be worthy?" Roar. A domineering dragon roar and sword shadow fell towards Palace Master Yun. Since they were both at the extreme realm, Jin Shun naturally chose an opponent of the same level. Only then would it be exciting. Xianing transformed into a beam of slaughtering sword light and pierced through the space, entering the world of lava and fighting with Old Man Lihua. Instantly, the world of lava churned violently as molten liquid scattered, revealing streaks of slaughtering sword light. Makamanji wielded the gentleman's sword and charged towards the Wind Emperor. To be more precise, the Wind Emperor was the first to activate his sword aura and slash towards Makamanji. Back in Sword City, he had said that if he had the chance, he would definitely experience the Southern Region Sword Sect's ultimate techniques. Today, he would use Makamanji to prove his sword Dao. The four emperors led by Palace Master Yin were stopped. There were still many overlords in front of Qin Hao, such as Yuan Shurtao, Lord Mengya, the Lord of the Ghost Wilderness, Sect Master Tatian, and many other overlords. Yuan Shurtao, Lord Mengyuzhu, and the Ghost Baron Emperor attacked at the same time, but Sect Master Tatian didn't move. His robe was stuck in place, as if he was struggling. Although Qin Hao was behind the scenes in the battle with the Heaven-Shaking clan, it didn't matter who cracked the Imperial artifact. He had already taken it. If he were to join forces with Yuan Shurtao again, he would feel uncomfortable. Since the sect leader of Heaven Trampling did not move, the sect members did not either. They all watched in silence. At this moment, Yuan Shurtao, who was the fastest, smashed his pair of sky-shaking hammers towards Qin Hao's head. The Emperor's will that it carried caused the void to rumble. However, when it landed, it had already lost its target. "He's so fast." Yuan Shurtao was shocked. Dinda had used the water wind step, but he only felt a gust of wind blowing in front of him. When he turned around, he found that Qin Hao was like a ghost. After passing him, the Imperial Rainbow silk rolled in the air and wrapped around the Lord of the Ghost Wilderness like a snake. The blood-red demon fire whipped towards him. The Lord of the Ghost Wilderness' ugly face let out a sinister laugh. How arrogant of him to attack him first. Did he think that he was easy to bully? He opened and closed his palms. The will of the way in his body surged. The Lord of the Ghost Wilderness split into more than 100 figures in an instant. It was difficult to tell which one was the real one. He slapped towards Qin Hao at the same time, wanting to show Li Chuji the Ghost Wilderness Imperial art. Qin Hao's eyes of 10,000 spirits flashed, and traces of flame patterns appeared in his eyes. He ignored the palm power that was pressing down on him from all directions. His sharp eyes locked onto a certain spot, and with a sweep of his hand, the Imperial Rainbow silk changed direction and whipped the figure's waist. As the whip lashed out, the red lotus flames of the way exploded. Immediately, the phantoms of the wasteland in the sky dissipated, and a shrill scream rang out in the air. How could it be? Li Chuji recognized his real body at a glance. With this question, the Lord of the Ghost Wilderness walked towards the end of his life. In the next moment, two terrifying blade chi penetrated his body from behind. Along with the violent Imperial Lord's rule, an incomparably bright platinum cross shot out from the center of his chest. With a loud bang, the Lord of the Ghost Wilderness dissipated into nothingness, annihilated in the rule blade will. Eastern Japanese dog thief. Yuan Shurtao was shocked. His expression gradually became furious. Hidden Blade attacked from behind and killed the unsuspecting Lord of the Ghost Wilderness, forcing out the soul-devouring parasitic worm. You believe this? With my ability, why would I need to share the Imperial weapon with you? Go to hell. Hidden Blade stabbed the Lord of the Ghost Wilderness to death. Without any hesitation, He directly appeared in front of Lord Mengyaju. His two blades slashed together, and the sky seemed to be cut in half by the turbulent blade chi. Lord Mengyaju was really shocked when he saw the Lord of the Ghost Wilderness suddenly die. At this time, the Lord's blade suddenly appeared in front of him. He screamed and hurriedly dodged. Hidden Blade cursed and chased after him. After she swallowed the soul-devouring parasitic worm, the divine soul resonated with Qin Hao. She had already received the news and rushed over. She casually found an excuse to enter the situation, and this group of high and mighty East Continent emperors actually believed her. Their IQ was worrying. She didn't know what to say. Anyway, the Ghost Wilderness ugly ghost didn't die in vain. She hoped that after this battle, Qin Hao would trust her and give her some imperial weapons to bring back to Yingzhou. Rumbling sounds continued everywhere in the void. The emperors of both sides found their opponents, and the emperors of the various forces also fought fiercely. The battle was extremely fierce. Qin Hao and Yuan Sherdao seemed to have been frozen in time. It actually calmed down. No one expected that Hidden Blade would turn around and sneak attack and kill the Lord of the Ghost Wilderness. When her blade fell, it immediately caused subtle changes in the two camps. Because of the death of the Lord of the Ghost Wilderness and the sudden betrayal of Hidden Blade, Yuntian Palace's side could be said to have lost two Dao affirmation powerhouses in an instant. They originally had the absolute upper hand, but now the two sides were balanced. Chapter 1757. In the boundless sky, above the clouds, this area was the battlefield of the Dao, proving Monarch Lords. The Monarch Lords were powerful, and ordinary monarchs could not withstand the impact of their Dao wills. In order to avoid affecting both teams, they all tacitly stayed away from the plains. In this area, waves of terrifying Emperor aura surged wildly, shaking the heavens and earth. Prince Chun of the Warring States country was fighting Palace Lord Yin. Qianing said to elderly Hua. Makamanji was fighting Feng Junfei. Shou Wuk and Song Yao were getting more and more intense. Hidden Blade chased after Mengya. These were the 10 monarch lords who had verified their Dao. In addition, Sect Master Tetian floated in the air and stared at the battle coldly. He didn't plan to get involved. He didn't want to be on Yuan Shirtao's side, but he wouldn't help Qin Hao's side either. He seemed to be waiting for the best opportunity to attack. Sect Master, what are you looking at? A voice came from his side. Sect Master Tetian looked at Sovereign Lord Moro cautiously. In fact, there was another reason why he didn't attack. Sovereign Lord Moro's stance was unclear. Sovereign Lord Moro didn't attack either, did he? Sect Master Tetian replied. Li Chuji was Denda's descendant. Even though Dendi had died, the Moro clan still had some ties with him. Sovereign Lord Moro apparently cared about their past relationship, since he was able to restrain himself from being tempted by the imperial artifact. Haha, the Moro clan is backed by the Daqin Empire. We rely on the power of Daqin, not Dendi. No matter who's in charge of Daqin, only those who have the power and resources of the empire are the true friends of the Moro clan, Sovereign Lord Moro explained. Monarch Moro explained frankly, but the sky-shaking race is greedy and unjust, and Palace Master Yun thinks that his Emperor's Dao is strong. So why would he care about us? Even if he wins this battle, would he really share the fruits with us? Sovereign Lord Moro, you're wise. I think so too. Sect Master Tatian smiled. Sovereign Lord Moro had hit the nail on the head. The reason why I didn't make a move was not because Li Chuji is Denda's descendant, which is of no benefit to my All-Devil clan. Why should I help him? However, Hierarch, please take a look. Jin Shin's cultivation is on par with Asgard Master Yun's, and Li Chuji's Monarch Lord is on par with Yuntian Palace's, especially since the pirates from Lu Island managed to kill the desolate, ugly ghost. Now that both sides have reached a point of equilibrium, our choices will tilt the balance even further. Whichever side we choose to help will have a greater chance of victory. Monarch Moro said. Brother Imo Luo, what brilliant ideas do you have? The sect master of the Sky Trampless sect had waited until now because he wanted to take advantage of the situation to raise his status so that he could get a bigger share of the profits. It's hard to say. In a head-on battle between Imperial Masters, it's very difficult to determine who's stronger with each move. Unless they're like the unlucky, desolate, ugly ghost who let his guard down and was killed by the laws of Tao insight executed by the desolate, ugly ghost. Lord Morrow let out a strange chuckle. He didn't make it clear who he would side with. Instead, he left the choice to Sect Master Tatian. Then should we observe further? The Sect Master of the Sky Trampler sect asked. Sure. Lord Morrow nodded. The overlords on his side weren't at a disadvantage, so they didn't need any help. Before entering the ruins, he had repeatedly warned Mo Xian to stay away from the All-Devil clan. It must have been because of Mu Yue. Of course, they had to save Mu Yue. Qin Hao didn't want to get the All-Devil clan involved. Lord Morrow understood that. The Sect Master of the Sky Trampler sect looked at the battle again and became less cautious of Lord Morrow. Lord Morrow was simple-minded and did everything for the sake of profit, just like him. There was no conflict between the two of them, so it would be better if they didn't fight. They were waiting to see which side showed signs of weakness first. Then they would attack and help the side with the advantage. That way, they would be able to take control of the archweapon. Boom! The terrifying sword aura and the archlight separated. Jin Chun roared as the mark of a divine pagoda appeared between his eyebrows. Endless battle intent circled around his arch body, and the halo of path attainment was extremely dazzling. He pointed the arch sword at Lord Yun with a carefree expression. After exchanging more than 20 blows, Lord Yun's precepts didn't weaken at all. They were on par with each other, and Lord Yun was indeed more durable than Yuan Shurtao. He was a rare opponent. Jin Shun, you and I are both at the peak of Tao confirmation. We only need to take a slight step forward, and we can achieve the true Self-Emperor Tao. Why we have to fight to the death, Furley Chu-san? Why don't we join forces and take him down? Wouldn't it be better if we split the Emperor weapon? Lord Yun shouted. His face was slightly red as he took 2 deep breaths. Jin Shun was stronger than he had imagined. If they were to fight to the death, the one who survived would be half dead. Share the arch weapon equally? Of course that's good. We Kim people started from scratch. Our ancestors were afraid of being poor. We built this vast empire from the bones of our ancestors. However, our ancestors used their blood to leave behind a sentence. If you want to be an emperor, you have to be a man first. Repeating this over and over again is a despicable act. You, Lord Yin, don't deserve to be a man. Let me teach you how to be a man first before we share the archweapon. Jin Shun rushed forward like thunder. He held the sword with both hands and tucked it under his armpits. His entire body was covered in a white gold arch aura. The power of the bloodline of the divine pagoda between his eyebrows continued to flow into Dilly. The sword exploded with the brilliance of the great path, spewing out a sword aura that was more than 100 feet long. When the sword was unleashed, the arch aura sealed the heavens and the earth as if a divine pagoda was suppressing everything. Lord Yin was so angry that his face was trembling. Jin Shen was a stubborn donkey. It seemed that he wasn't going to stop at all. Lord Yin decided to fight with all his might. Lord Yin raised his head and raised his palms to the sky. His hair danced in the wind as his will of the way exploded. The arch ring expanded wildly and swallowed everything. At the same time, 2 arch weapons appeared above his palms. Using all his strength wasn't enough. Jin Shen's sword gave him a great deal of pressure. He needed the arch weapons to support him. Boom, boom, boom. The battle between Jin Shun and Lord Yun could be said to be destructive. No one dared to get close to them. Since he had promised Qin Hao, Jin Shun had to fight with his life on the line. Similarly, Lord Yin couldn't back down. If he wanted to obtain the remaining arch weapons on the plane, he had to crush all obstacles. Anyone who stood in his way had to die. Clang! On the other side of the battle, the golden sword aura was repelled by the God King's halberd. The golden aura that enveloped Shou Wuk was dimmer than before. Through the light, one could see that there were wounds on his body. Cursed gray, the arch light flickered in his flesh. Showuk had just reached consummation and couldn't control it at will. Dilly wasn't as good as Tsang Yao in terms of using it. However, Tsang Yao wasn't at an advantage either. He was panting heavily as sweat dripped down his face. His grip on the God King's halberd was getting weaker and weaker. In terms of battle techniques, Showuk was slightly weaker than him. However, the golden sword aura on his body was too difficult to deal with. It was clearly a condensation of Wei Will, but it was like a real divine soldier. Tsang Yao felt as if he was colliding within the archweapon with every sword aura that came out. Tsang Yao's condition was getting worse. As the battle dragged on, Showuk's the arch aura became more and more stable. He was using his strength more and more smoothly. It was as if he was using Tsang Yao as a sparring partner to stabilize his cultivation level. Chapter 1758. The battle between Showuk and Tsang Yao was changing slightly as time went on. Showuk had the upper hand, but it wasn't enough to decide the winner immediately. Makamanji and Feng Junfei cultivated different sword arts, but their sword techniques were both excellent. They were evenly matched, and neither could suppress the other. Swordmaster Xian Ying and Daoist Li Huo were the same. Hidden Blade chased Mengya fiercely, but Mengya didn't panic. Apparently, he wasn't afraid of Hidden Blade. Regardless of whether it was Jin Shun, Palace Master Yun, or the others, none of them could end the battle quickly. Below, the fierce battle between the disciples of the various forces was much more tragic. Many people died with every breath. Kim people from the Warring States period were the most powerful. They were born in the military and were often more brutal than cultivators. They were also facing the strongest cultivators from Yuntian Palace. The cultivators of Yuntian Palace were generally of high cultivation, and their imperial methods were shockingly powerful. The Jin clan was not inferior to them at all. Moreover, Jin Shun had brought a large number of cultivators. When they fought together, they were actually able to somewhat suppress the cultivators of Yuntian Palace. Zhuiying Sword Palace was fighting Lihua House, while Elder Tian Yun led Qin Ning and the others to fight the Heaven-Shaking clan. In the battle with the Heaven-Trampling sect, the Heaven-Shaking clan had suffered many casualties. Shueiyao Palace had no pressure at all. The martial artists of Flowing Island were experts in the art of assassination, while the martial artists of Ghost Desolate Country were also experts in the art of assassination. It could be said that experts met experts. Although the two sides did not fight as fiercely as the other sects, the death rate was the highest. Often, unknowingly, one would die an unnatural death without even knowing. After the battle with the Miao tribe, not many warriors from Lu Island survived. Besides, the most difficult wizard was killed by Su Jin. They couldn't stop the Ghost Baron assassins at all. In addition, the Ghost Baron Emperor was killed by Hidden Blade. This made the Ghost Baron country's assassins furious. They vented their anger on the warriors from Lu Island. If Su Jin hadn't brought Xiaogua, Yi Shuihan, and Qin Yun to help, Hidden Blade might have been alone. After this battle, he might not have been able to bring any of his subordinates back to Yingzhou. Su Jin's flute music interfered with the movements of the Ghost Wilderness assassins, which gave the warriors of Flowing Island a chance to counterattack. However, the situation of the Flowing Island warriors was not the worst. The Sword Sect of the southern region was in a worse state than them. The Sword Sect of the south region challenged the Holy Sword Wind people. Emperor Yuan's numbers and quality weren't as good as the forces of the East Continent. If this was all, they could still hold on for a while. Once the Kim people gained the upper hand, they could come to support them. However, everyone seemed to have overlooked an existence: Feng Shangshi. Feng Gaishi was at the peak of the 8th tier of the Dao validation realm. He was half a step away from becoming a Monarch Lord. Basically, no one could stop him. When he charged into the Sword Sect's group, there was a storm of blood. Fierce wind and sword chi swept past. No matter which elder of the Sword Sect it was, they were either killed or crippled. Not only the Sword Sect, none of the factions present, including the Kim people and the Yuntian Palace, were weaker than the martial Monarch realm cultivators. He was like a fearless wolf that ceaselessly devoured the lives of the sword sect's disciples and elders. Pucci, a sword pierced forward and sank into the chest of a sword sect elder. Feng Gaishi had a savage smile on his face. The sword hilt under his palm twisted, and the emperor's will of the laws blasted into the sword sect elder, crushing his internal organs. The emperor's will of the sword sect elder erupted. His body bloomed with a crazy emperor's light. He pressed his hands on Feng Gaishi's shoulders, wanting to die together with him. But this was only his wishful thinking. There was no chance at all. As Feng Gaishi's dilly erupted, the person under his sword exploded, and his divine soul disappeared. In the next second, Feng Gaishi continued to harvest the lives of others. Fierce battles were everywhere. The various factions were in a frenzy. It seemed that no one noticed the danger that the sword sect was facing. Even if they did, they were powerless to help. Zhang Yi challenged Baiyan, wanted to take revenge for the humiliation on the Dao cleansing platform. Xiaogua, Qin Yuan, and Yi Shuhan's cultivation were too low. They were not even as strong as the sword sect elders. Fighting with Feng Gaishi was equivalent to courting death. The only one who could restrain him was Su Jin, but he could only restrain him. It was impossible for him to win. Su Jin came from the Alchemy Peak. He was good at controlling sounds, but he was not good at frontal attacks. Feng Gaishi, on the other hand, was a sword cultivator. His sword Dao was the most ferocious of all Daos. In terms of cultivation level, Su Jin was also one level lower than Feng Gaishi. Fierce sword Dao gales swept out. Everywhere they passed, people were sent flying. Their swords were broken, and people died. Under Feng Gaishi's massacre, the sword sect's casualties rose rapidly. At this moment, two figures slowly walked into the plains from a certain direction. They seemed to be walking slowly, but after a few steps, they were already in the middle of the battle. Your senses were right. He is here. One of them was wearing a tattered robe. He raised his head and looked at the sky. His eyes fell on the body of the devil flame. He looked at Qin Hao, who was confronting Yuan Shitao, and laughed hoarsely. Beside him stood a young man. His body was straight, but his eyes were dull. His facial features were stiff, and he seemed to be mentally retarded. The young man also looked at Qin Hao in the sky. His mouth opened slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but he did not know how to express himself. He had even forgotten Qin Hao's name. If Xiaogua and Yi Shuhan were here at this moment, they would be deeply shocked, because the young man's face was very similar to Lin Feng, who had died in the Medicine Valley. Aya, there's a guy who's actually using the wind sword art, just like you. Aya, stop looking at the sky. It's filled with Emperor Lords. You can't get involved. Go, find that guy who's killing the most, the one who makes people want to punch him. If you're lucky enough to kill him, that person in the sky who's spewing blood and fire might be very happy. The man in the tattered robe urged the young man beside him. Okay. The young man who looked like Lin Feng nodded. He glanced at the battle and soon found the person who was killing the most. Feng Gaishi. At this moment, Lin Feng's aura changed qualitatively. Two terrifying storms seemed to be born in his eyes. A raging power of desolation swept out from under his feet. Between heaven and earth, a terrible wind blew, and the ground under his feet cracked inch by inch. Buzz. With a move, Lin Feng was like a fierce hurricane. His aura was unstoppable. He appeared directly above Feng Gaishi's head and attacked like a tornado. Chapter 1759. The sword sack sword techniques are just SOSO. What's Southern Region's #1 sword Dao Holy Land? You're just a bunch of trash. Feng Gaishi killed and severely injured several sword sect elders. No one could withstand a single strike from him. He suppressed the entire sword sect. If luck was here, would you dare to be so arrogant? A sword sect elder clutched the sword wound on his chest as blood flowed out of his mouth. He looked up at the sky and saw Shou Wuk and Tsang Yao fighting fiercely. In the blink of an eye, nearly 20 years had passed. That sword Dao Jr. had advanced from the Yuan Venerate realm to the Emperor Lord realm. His cultivation had already surpassed this group of elders in the sect. Showuk shouldered the sword Sek's hope, and he did not disappoint. He was the #1 sword Dao prodigy of the southern region. Even when facing the top geniuses of the East Continent, he still shone brilliantly. Showuk's goal in the sword Dao was getting higher and higher. Now, he was able to compete with Emperor Lords. If he were to fight Feng Gaishi would not be able to laugh. No, in Wuk's eyes, Feng Gaishi was no longer worthy of being his opponent. In Sword City, you couldn't even block a single strike from Wuk. How dare you talk big in front of us and look down on the sword techniques? The East Continent's geniuses are really pitiful. Old Meng sneered coldly. No, the one who lost his head flawless, the one who couldn't block a single sword strike, is also him. He has already lost to me in Sword City. He is my defeated opponent. All of you shut your stinky mouths. A terrifying gale erupted from Feng Gaoshi's body as he let out a hysterical roar. When the 3 words flawless entered his ears, it was like a thorn that pierced into his soul, deeply affecting his sword heart. He glared fiercely at Old Meng and swung his sword. The Gale Emperor intent merged with the sword Qi, causing a turbulent sword Dao current to engulf Old Meng. He wanted to make this old man who mocked him disappear forever. Buzz. The flute music continued to flow, shaking the entire space. Invisible sound waves came down, forming a circular wall of Qi, trapping Elder Meng within. The violent sword Qi flow came crashing down, and the music was shattered by the sword light. Elder Meng spat out a mouthful of blood, and his legs left the ground as he was blown away. However, the sword did not succeed in taking his life. Su Jin was holding back a large number of desolate ghost assassins, but he still had the strength to interfere with the other battles. He could not tolerate Feng Gaishi's unbridled behavior. Feng Gaishi looked at Su Jin. 7 Emperor's rings were released. This person was in the 7th tier of the Wei Proving Realm. However, to be able to use music to block his Gale Sword essence, his strength was not bad. Just like Showuk, this person seemed to be Li Chuji's right-hand man. What kind of expression would Li Chuji have if he killed him? A ferocious smile appeared on Feng Gaishi's face. He gave up on the sword school, and the will of the Wei in his body rumbled. He raised his hand and slashed at Su Jin from afar. Although the latter's strength was not bad, he was still a bit weaker than Feng Gaishi. Rumble. Suddenly, the roar of a storm came from above. Before Feng Gaishi could even raise his head, he felt a terrifying force of wind pressing down on him. His legs sank into the ground, and his face looked like it had been cut by a sword, with streaks of blood appearing. What a strong will of the Way of the Wind. The pressure coming from Dilly was not strong. He was only in the 5th tier of the Wei Proving Realm. However, the will of the Way of the Wind mixed in it made Feng Gaishi, a genius from the Wind People, feel his heart palpitate. The will of the Way of the Gale in his body seemed to have been provoked. The power of his bloodline roared. Feng Gaishi swung his sword directly above his head. Whoosh! A gale of sword shadow cut through the void. With a dull sound, the Hurricane Lin Feng turned into was directly split apart. Then, an expressionless young man landed in front of Feng Gaishi, looking at him with lifeless eyes. Who are you? Feng Gaishi asked coldly. He felt Lin Feng's aura. His will of the Way of the Wind was so pure, even purer than Feng Gaishi's. There was no flaw to be found. Other than the Wind People, there seemed to be no other overlord force in the East Continent that was proficient in Wind Elemental Emperor's methods. If I kill you, others will be very happy, Lin Feng said in a shaky voice. He did not say his name. He was also very unfamiliar with his name. He did not even know if he was Lin Feng. What did you say? Kill me? Feng Gaishi's face twisted fiercely. For many years, he had not heard such arrogant words. No matter who he met before, those who said such words to him were all dead. Today, a person came out of nowhere and said that others would be very happy if he killed him. He was Feng Gaishi, a cultivator who was half a step away from becoming an imperial lord. What did this person think of him? You are simply courting death. Feng Gaishi's voice was hoarse. He was so angry that he did not know how to respond. The fierce wind circled around his body, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. No matter who this stupid guy was, or who he was behind, Feng Gaishi felt that he would not live up to his name if he did not kill him. Boom! The wind of the great path roared and shook. Above Feng Gaishi's body, a huge sword wind condensed and rushed forward, wanting to penetrate Lin Feng's chest. The limit of the 8th tier of the Wei Proving Realm was only half a step away from becoming an Imperial Lord. Feng Gaishi's rule power was very strong, but Lin Feng's expression did not change, as if he was emotionless. He did not use any techniques, but the wind silently spread out from his body, becoming stronger and stronger. In the end, his body turned into a thick tornado and rushed toward Feng Gaishi. "You are courting death," Feng Gaishi sneered. The 5th tier of the Wei Proving Realm wanted to fight with him at the limit of the 8th tier of the Wei Proving Realm. It was no different from suicide. Boom, boom, boom. The two storms of different will penetrated each other. The wind and sword chi directly penetrated the tornado, but Feng Gaishi's attack did not stop the tornado, let alone disperse it. Although he had penetrated the tornado, it was still pressing toward him. A faint voice could be heard echoing in the air. "It hurts. How is this possible?" Feng Gaishi's expression changed. The guy inside was still alive after being penetrated by his sword chi. He only cried out in pain. What the hell was going on? At this time, Lin Feng was indeed injured in his tornado form. He only attacked without defending, and his Dao Proving Realm power was not as strong as Feng Gaishi's. If he came out in his true form, there would be a huge sword-shaped wound on his chest. However, this was no different from a minor injury to Lin Feng. As long as the true Emperor's Dao didn't directly destroy his soul, his strange body could recover on its own. After all, it wasn't his first time being penetrated. Ever since he woke up in the secret realm, Li Wanji had been beating and torturing him every day. Feng Gaishi was too gentle compared to this, to the point that Lin Feng didn't have the heart to kill him again. However, since Li Wanji said that Qin Hao would be happy, he still had to kill this guy. The power of the universal earth flowed and began to heal his body, fusing with Feng Gaishi's soul. Lin Feng's aura didn't weaken at all. On the contrary, it became even stronger. His cultivation didn't change, but his Dao intent continued to rise. When the sword slammed into Feng Gaishi's face, his tattered clothes scattered everywhere. Chapter 1760. At that moment, somewhere above the clouds, Qin Hao stood in the air and stared at Heavenly Emperor Han Tian and Yuan Tao. The two of them were exceptionally quiet. Li Wanji had followed Qin Hao's aura and brought Lin Feng here to stop Feng Gaishi. Qin Hao naturally didn't know about that. He focused all his attention on Yuan Tao. Only one of the two great emperors could survive today. With the same cultivation level, Qin Hao was confident that he could defeat two great emperors with his special constitution, cultivation level, and great emperor techniques. Even if he couldn't defeat three, he could at least hold them off. That was why he dared to lead everyone to fight against Yuntian Palace. His original plan was to stop Yuan Tao and his son, as well as Mengya, and leave Palace Lord Yun to Jinshun. That way, Makamanji and the others wouldn't be at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. When Hidden Blade arrived to stall Heavenly Emperor Tatian, Jinshun would be able to take down Song Yao, who was the weakest among them. However, his plan couldn't keep up with the changes. He teamed up with Hidden Blade and killed the great emperor of the ghostly wilderness. It went so smoothly that even Qin Hao was surprised. Heavenly Emperor Tetian was talking to Moro about something. He watched the battle coldly from the side and didn't interfere. The two changes brought great convenience to Qin Hao's team. At that moment, Yuan Tao was the only one in front of him. Even though Yuan Tao's cultivation level was extraordinary, he was destined to be killed by Dendi. Buzz! The great emperor will exploded. In an instant, the two were suppressed by the surging great emperor might. 9 dazzling great emperor's halos bloomed under their feet. Qin Hao and Yuan Tao attacked at the same time. Qin Hao's body was covered in demonic flames, as if he had turned into a blood-red furnace. The Red Lotus Overlord Fire roared as the Imperial Rainbow Ribbon turned into a flaming whip in his hand. He waved his hand, and the space cracked crazily. Yuan Tao didn't dare to be careless. He smashed his heaven-shaking hammers at the same time and collided with the demonic flame whip. A terrifying muffled sound shook the void. An unparalleled force was transmitted, and Yuan Tao's body slid back uncontrollably. Compared to Dilly, he obviously couldn't gain the upper hand against Tribulation's Sword Emperor. Yuan Shurtao wasn't surprised by this. During the battle on the Dao Mountain 3 years ago, Li Chusan had yet to reach the great circle of the Dao realm. Li Chusan was already able to fight Yuan Shurtao in close combat when he was only at the 8th stage of the Yuan the Arch realm. Now that Li Chusan had become an Emperor Lord, his strength was definitely stronger than before. Roar! The sound of the battle whale roared. A huge phantom of a sea whale enveloped Yuan Tao's body and resonated with his divine soul. As he slid back, he smashed his heaven-shaking hammer forward. The phantom of the battle whale exploded with dazzling Great Emperor's light as if it was alive. It flew forward, using the sky as the sea and the clouds as the waves. It opened its bloody mouth and tried to swallow Qin Hao. Fighting with your secondary soul is simply courting death. If you don't use the Great Path Will, I guarantee you won't survive the next attack. Qin Hao said coldly. The imperial rainbow silk in his hand condensed into a straight line. It was like a long, flaming sword that was hundreds of feet long. It pierced into the mouth of the battle whale. Suddenly, the Red Lotus Will of the Way exploded. The imperial ring under his feet shook with a whistling sound. With a boom, endless tongues of fire pierced through the body of the battle whale. The enormous creature was instantly annihilated. Yuan Shurtao stared at Qin Hao, at the blood-red flames on his opponent's body. What rank of soul fire did this soul fire belong to? He smiled bitterly in his heart. No matter what Li Chuji's soul fire was, Li Chuji wasn't wrong. If he didn't bring out the sky-bearing Dao insight, then he, Yuan Shurtao, had no chance of winning. I want to bury the heavens. With an angry roar, Ma Yingtao lifted his hammers into the air. His will of the Emperor rose up and resonated with the Great Path. Terrifying Great Emperor Qi filled the air. The Great Path in this area turned into the will of the Great Path of burying heaven. Cracks opened in the sky, flashing with terrible lightning. Desolate ancient tablets engraved with curses rained down one after another on Qin Hao's head. The entire world was filled with whistling sounds. The Empyrean rainbow ribbon in Qin Hao's hand danced in the air, resembling a long ribbon of flame that coiled around his body. The more it danced, the faster it danced. Rumbling sounds could be heard as countless heaven-burying monuments slammed into it. Upon contact with the flames, they were instantly pulverized. Every rumbling sound caused Qin Hao's body to tremble violently. Bang! Yuan Shurtao took a step forward, throwing out a hammer with his palm. A huge hammer shadow blasted forward. At this time, the other heaven-shaking hammer in his hand turned into a ring, fiercely smashing into the previous hammer shadow. Instantly, the hammer shadow exploded with a terrifying power. Its speed increased by several times, and the force it brought with it seemed to be able to crush mountains and rivers. Child's play. Qin Hao let go of the Empyrean rainbow ribbon, but it didn't move by itself. It accurately blocked every heaven-bearing monument that was falling down. Then, a dazzling golden light burst out from his right fist. His right arm, right foot, right knee, and waist, every major acupoint was shining with sacred golden light. The 9-Palace War Emperor spell was activated all over his body, opening a total of 6 palaces. The power of the 6 palaces filled his body with unparalleled explosive power. Waves of power blended together and finally condensed on his fist. A pure golden fist blasted out and slammed into the hammer shadow that was coming at him. Bang! The sky seemed to have collapsed. With a cracking sound, the Monarch weapon that had been preserved by the sky-shaking race for generations was actually covered in cracks from Qin Hao's punch. The Monarch light immediately dimmed as if it was going to collapse at any moment. It flew back into Ma Yingtao's hand with a wail. What a terrifying power! Yuan Shitao lowered his head and looked at Li Chusan's sky-shaking hammer with great difficulty. With one punch, Li Chusan had nearly shattered a rank 8 emperor weapon. Even Jin Shun and Palace Master Yin would not be able to do what Li Chusan had done. Chapter 1761. Yuan Shitao's heart trembled. In terms of Dilly, Li Chuji's strength was definitely not below that of Jin Shun and Palace Lord Yin. It would be extremely dangerous for him to run into such a terrifying opponent. However, there was no way out. He could only hope that Palace Lord Yin would defeat Jin Shun and come to his aid. The only thing Yuan Shitao could do now was to stall for time. This attack is only 40% of my full strength. You won't be able to hold on for long, Qin Hao said coldly, seeing through his opponent's intentions. However, how could Jin Shun be defeated so easily? You think I'll believe your bluff? Yuan Shitao shouted. His eyes were covered with a layer of gray. The sky burying will in his body was gradually increasing. Dilly obviously could not win in close combat, so he changed to using the power of the will to attack. There was a loud bang in the void, and the rumbling sounds of the sky-burying steels became uniform. The countless sky-burying steels changed direction and fell in front of Yuan Shitao. They piled up higher and higher, thicker and thicker. Tens of thousands of huge steels actually gathered into one, like a shield in front of Yuan Shitao. They emitted a terrifying curse light, illuminating the boundless world. Runes flowed on the giant tablet. The sky burying will continue to strengthen. At this moment, Yuan Shitao's aura was much stronger than when he was fighting Jin Shun. Obviously, he had used all his strength. He smashed the sky-shaking hammer on the giant tablet. With a buzz, the giant tablet rushed forward like a mountain, crushing everything. It wanted to flatten this world and suppress Qin Hao under the 9 underworlds. Qin Hao stepped into the void, and his body shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. His body was surrounded by raging flames, creating a sonic boom along the way. The 9 Palace War Emperor art was activated again, and the 6 major acupoints on his body flashed with dazzling divine light. A loud roar was heard, and the heavens and the earth shook. His fist landed on the giant monument, and suddenly the demonic flames raged. The red lotus, will of the way, and the sky-burying will of the way intertwined. Qin Hao let out a muffled groan as blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. How much power did this punch have? Yuan Shitao sneered. Did he really think that he didn't have the power to fight back? Qin Hao steadied himself. His 1,000-spirit fiery eyes flickered, and his gaze fell on the flowing runes on the giant tablet. Under his gaze, he saw the dense cursed runes arranged in a regular pattern. It was like an army had formed a battle formation, which greatly strengthened the heaven-burying will. Even with the power of the 6 palaces, he still couldn't break it again. Next punch, 50%. Qin Hao stretched out his left fist, and balls of sacred golden light burst out from various parts of his body, symmetrical to the right side of his body. When the power of the 9 palaces was activated, the flames of the way in his body roared. Qin Hao's body blossomed with an incomparably terrifying flame. Even Yuan Shitao, who was hiding behind the giant sky-burying monument, felt extremely uncomfortable. Immediately after, his demonic flaming body rushed forward and punched the sky-burying steel again. The 10,000 spirit fire eyes saw through the rune formation and hit the weakest point. Suddenly, the rune formation was in chaos and the steel cracked. Endless punches poured into the steel through the cracks and tore open the steel even more. Boom! There was a loud roar. Qin Hao's punches penetrated the steel. His body continued to move forward, and this punch landed heavily on Yuan Shitao's chest. Yuan Shitao's eyes were wide open as an indescribable pain swept through his entire body. His sternum collapsed and broke under Yuan Shitao's fist. With a bang, Yuan Shitao's body was sent flying 300 meters away, and blood sprayed out from his mouth. 50%. How is this possible? A painful and hoarse voice came out. A layer of blood-red flames flickered in Yuan Shitao's collapsed chest. He had originally hoped that Palace Lord Yun would come to his aid, but this hope was reduced to smithereens with this punch. 50%? However, Yuan Shitao had already used 90% of his cultivation. Without using the rules, just relying on the will of the Wei and my fists, 50% might be too high. It might be more appropriate to call it 45%. Qin Hao's eyes grew colder and colder. It was as if he was looking at a dead man. It was time to end the battle with Yuan Shitao. Yuan Shitao raised his head and screamed. The light of the curse that enveloped the space surged into his body. 45%? What a cruel humiliation. If this was true, he would definitely not be able to withstand Li Chuji's next attack. He could not hold back anymore. Otherwise, he would die. The will of the Way of the Rules was retracted. It was as if the great Tao in all directions had been swallowed into his body. Yuan Shitao's appearance became uglier and uglier. His body became more and more deformed. Pieces of rotten stones were embedded in his face. His strong body bent and sank. A large bump appeared on his back. Disgusting mucus flowed out. As the bump burst, a stele was revealed. It looked like a gravestone that he carried on his back. On it were the faces of living people. Hundreds of faces were screaming on the stele. It was as if they were viciously cursing the world. At this moment, Yuan Shitao's appearance could no longer be called human. He was simply a monster. His body was pressed down by the stele. It was as if he could not withstand the curses of the faces. Finally, his 4 limbs fell to the ground. His eerie eyes stared at Qin Hao. His eyes were completely white. So this is the original form of the Huse. How lowly and dirty. Qin Hao stood in the air. Dense scales slowly covered his body and climbed up to his facial features. A ball of demonic fire formed at his palm. It expanded rapidly until it was hundreds of acres large. Looking up from the ground, it looked like a meteorite with flowing flames. It also emitted bursts of dragon's might. You must die. Yuan Shitao roared hoarsely. His 4 limbs crawled wildly. He jumped toward Qin Hao like a monster. His speed was incomparably fast. The will of the Berry Heaven that he carried was twice as strong as usual. If he fought with Jin Shin again in this situation, even Prince Chun of the Warring States period would have to retreat. But Qin Hao was not afraid. The dragon-shaped flames circled around the meteorite. The power of law comprehended by the number 1 martial lord of the divine wilderness fused with Dendi. The flames on his palm burned even more fiercely. The sky trembled as if it could not withstand Qin Hao's increasing power. The clouds in a radius of 10,000 miles collapsed and dissipated. A large number of spatial faults intersected. Then, the flaming meteorite on his palm was thrown forward. Wung, like a mountain of gods and demons. It fell toward Emperor Han Tian, who was carrying the cursed stele on his back. Yuan Shitao's eyes were bloodshot. The hundreds of faces on the stele on his back screamed at the same time. The sound waves were chaotic. It was as if the ghosts of purgatory wanted to devour the world. An incomparably fierce gray emperor light suddenly shot out. It went against the sky and pierced through the falling meteorite. Then, the meteorite was split in half. The roar of a giant dragon came from the sky. At this moment, everyone on the battlefield was alarmed. They looked over in shock. Everyone saw a dragon-shaped flame falling down. One of the 3 immortals of the Eastern Sea, the current Emperor Han Tian clan, Yuan Shitao, died. No! A mournful cry reverberated. Song Yao's eyes cracked. He saw with his own eyes that his father, who had been invincible since childhood, was killed. God Burial Valley, Emperor Han Tian clan had fallen. Chapter 1762. 80%. Qin Hao watched coldly. The red lotus will of the Wei burned Yuan Shitao into black ashes that scattered in the wind. Under the bombardment of the meteorite rules, the power of the dragon soul, the Red Lotus Overlord Fire, and many other rules, Will of the Way, and Imperial techniques, this power took up 80% of his cultivation. The other 20% was naturally the reincarnation laws and the evil fetus power. However, he couldn't use and control that evil power. All of a sudden, a sharp pain radiated from the back of his hand. Qin Hao looked down and saw a bite mark on his hand. The bite mark gradually transformed into a human face. Vaguely, the facial features resembled Yuan Shitao's. At this moment, Yuan Shitao opened his mouth and let out a mournful curse. Boom! The Red Lotus, Will of the Way, in Qin Hao's body roared. The flames of the Way surged on his hand and burned the face into nothingness. The Imperial Lords were indeed not simple. The moment Yuan Shitao died, the cursing rules were imprinted on Qin Hao's body. However, even if the dragon scale armor was broken, the cursing rules actually didn't affect Qin Hao much. How could the negative effects of weakening the Imperial spirit be stronger than the evil power in his body? If it weren't for Yuan Shitao's disgusting face, Qin Hao wouldn't have bothered to deal with it. Ah! Another scream was heard from somewhere in the battle. The voice was hoarse and extremely painful. Almost at the moment when Qin Hao killed Imperial Lord Han Tian, Mo Luo, and heaven-trampling sect leader, who were watching silently, attacked at the same time. Two terrifying Imperial Lord Halos were released. Their Will of the Way roared. They charged directly into a world of flames. The Imperial Lord Will of the Way was ferocious. Moreover, there were two of them. The moment the majestic Imperial might surged in, the flame domain couldn't withstand it and shattered. When the crowd heard the scream, they saw Mo Luo's palm piercing through Elder Li Hua's chest. Heaven-trampling sect leader stomped down on Elder Li Hua's head. His Will of the Way condensed into a huge divine foot that bloomed with extremely dazzling imperial light. It shook Elder Li Hua's head until it was full of cracks and his spiritual soul was shattered. However, there was another opponent here, Swordmaster Hyunying. Puchi. Hyunying's sword of slaughter pierced through the old man's brow. Boundless sword chi of rules wreaked havoc. The old man's spiritual soul had already been shattered after being ambushed by Moro and heaven-trampling sect leader. He was immediately shredded to pieces by the sword chi of rules. The old man's body fell straight to the ground. The third Emperor Lord was dead. Leave no one alive. Mo Luo roared loudly. His imperial might shook the world as he stared at the sect leader of the heaven-trampling sect. One of them turned into a stream of light and extended his palm, pressing down on Meng Yaju's head. The other crushed Song Yao with his will, trying to suppress him. Cough, cough. Hyunying was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. His body was covered in sparks. His soul seemed to be burning fiercely. His expression was somewhat painful. Although he wasn't at a disadvantage in the battle with the old man, he was injured by the old man's will. However, it wasn't serious. Hyunying scanned the battlefield. In the next moment, he turned into a murderous sword aura and rushed toward Makamanji. Feng Junfei heard the ear-piercing sound of a sword whistling from afar. He had already sensed that Yuan Tao and the old Taoist Li Hua's aura had disappeared. He couldn't help but sigh helplessly, knowing that he couldn't do it anymore. Li Chuji's fate was sealed. He forced the Yun sword away with one strike and turned around to slash in the direction where Hyunying was flying from. His body flickered, and when he appeared again, he was already beside Feng Gaishi. Let's go. The Wind Emperor lifted Feng Gaishi, whose facial features were distorted after being beaten up by Lin Feng. The father and son tore the space apart and escaped. They didn't even have time to care about their clansmen. They directly left the battlefield in this troublesome place. In a haze, they seemed to be able to hear Feng Gaishi's roar, saying something like, "Tell me your name." The Wind Emperor fled with Feng Gaishi. Wind people of the Sacred Sword sect were suddenly in a mess. Many emperors fled frantically. However, Meng Yaju wasn't so lucky. With his cultivation, it wasn't difficult for him to escape if he insisted on it. However, his opponent was Hidden Blade. His movement technique and reaction were surprisingly fast. Meng Yezhu had just torn a space passage with Dilly. As soon as he stepped into it, Hidden Blade slashed it into pieces with his saber aura. As a result, Meng Yezhu miserably teleported 1,000 meters away and immediately appeared in the sight of the emperors. I'll give them all to you. I don't want them anymore. I don't want them anymore. Meng Yezhu's face was filled with horror. In his eyes, 2 Emperor's sword auras pierced through the space. In addition, Hidden Blade's saber aura also landed on his head. He desperately explained, wanting to convey the most sincere thoughts in his heart at this moment to everyone. However, no one cared about what he said. Makamanji and Hyunying's sword auras pierced through his body. Following that, Meng Yezhu's body was split into 2 by Hidden Blade. His Emperor's soul was destroyed. The 4th Emperor Lord had fallen. Meng Yezhu, who came from the Celestial Cliffs, left his life in the God Burial Valley forever. Buzz. Rumbling sounds rang out in the air as countless sky-burying monuments descended, blotting out the sun as they blocked in front of the head of the guards, Wu Quebec. After that, these sky-burying monuments were all crushed by Mo Luo's Emperor's will. Unfortunately, Song Yao's figure was nowhere to be seen. He had successfully escaped, cold and decisive. Even when his father died, he didn't panic. If this person isn't eliminated, he will definitely become a huge threat. Mo Luo's face sank. Song Yao was truly ruthless. I'm sorry, it's my fault. Shou Wuk dispersed the 10,000 golden sword will and spoke with guilt. He was the one who failed to kill Song Yao. Junior, what you did is actually very impressive. After all, Song Yao isn't an ordinary character. The bloodline of old ancestor Han Tian flows in his veins. Mo Luo went up and consoled Shou Wuk, patting his shoulder. In the future, your achievements will far surpass Song Yao. I have high hopes for you. Bang! 2 heavy sounds shook everyone's eardrums. Everyone looked over and saw that the battle between Jin Shun and Asgard Master Yun had reached the most critical moment. Chapter 1763. Jin Shun and Palace Lord Yun separated. Their Emperor Qi floated around them. Jin Shun shouted to the crowd, "No one is allowed to interfere." The battle of proving one's Tao was a battle of dignity. Otherwise, even if he won, he would not be proud. Jin Shun, between you and me, must one of us die? Palace Lord Yun looked around. Makamanji, Hyuning, and the other imperial lords had sealed the space. Qin Hao was also among them. It was obvious that Yuan Shurtao and the others had lost. However, Palace Lord Yin did not show any fear. Other than Jin Shun, no one had the ability to take his life. Let's use one last move. I know you're still holding back. Only by defeating me will you have the chance to leave. Jin Shun said, "You are forcing me to send you to the underworld." Palace Lord Yin laughed coldly. Up until now, he had not gained any advantage over Jin Shun. It was time to use that move. Originally, Palace Lord Yin had prepared this move to enter the God Burial Palace. Before he left, the Grand Elder had warned him that only this move had a chance of shaking the guards of the palace and allowing him to enter. After all, the Grand Elder had also entered the God Burial Valley. Jin Shun had proven his Tao and was extremely powerful. If Palace Lord Yin did not use his killer move, it would be difficult to suppress him. At that moment, Palace Lord Yin slowly stretched his palms toward the sky. His eyes seemed to emit divine light. The bloodline power in his body roared. His will of the Tao was crazily invading every inch of the void. Layers of Emperor's rings exploded with dazzling light under his feet. His will of the Emperor and the great Tao in the sky seemed to have a strange resonance. Suddenly, the faint voice of a god could be heard. It was as if it came from ancient times. A powerful pressure entered the divine soul of every imperial lord. Everyone saw an incomparably dazzling divine light fall. An unparalleled divine body descended from the void. It was like the god of the sky that ruled the sky. It suppressed the heavens and stood behind Palace Lord Yin. This is bloodline power, the god of the sky. Everyone's hearts pounded violently. What a powerful pressure. It was the first time that Hyun, Ing, Imo, Luo, Tatian Hierophant, and the other emperors of the Eastern continent had seen the master of the Yuntian Palace unleash his bloodline power. Such a terrifying aura was indeed worthy of being called the #1 orthodoxy in the Middle Worlds. It must have been a powerful killing move passed down in the Yuntian Palace. At this moment, Jin Shun had completely forced Asgard Master Yun to use his full strength. Because this move was too eye-catching, its destructive power was extremely strong, and it was very difficult to control perfectly. It was easy to accidentally injure those around him. However, there were no other Imperial Lords around Asgard Master Yun. Divine Tao, Will of the Sky. Qin Hao stared at the huge divine body in the void. Extremely strong, murderous intent burst from the bottom of his heart. This Will of the Sky actually came from the Yuntian Palace. One of the murderers who attacked him outside the Buried God Palace back then was the Grand Elder of the Yuntian Palace. The decaying scales grew again with the life force of the gloomy, tranquil water, covering every inch of his body. In his spiritual soul, the power of the dragon's soul roared. Murderous intent and battle intent merged together. Qin Hao's fire eyes of 10,000 spirits flickered with overbearing light. He stared at the body in the shadow of the god of the sky. A divine weapon glowing with emerald light slowly coalesced under his palm. It is said that the 5 realms of the Eastern continent were the core of the ancient gods' continent. Some of the bloodlines of the ancient gods have been left behind since ancient times. I didn't expect the Yuntian Palace to have the bloodline of the gods, the divine Tao, Will of the Sky, and the power of the pinnacle of the way. I don't know if Jin Shun can block this move of Asgard Master Yun. The Will of the Sky that emanated from Asgard Master Yun grew stronger and stronger. Hyun Ing and the others looked at Jin Shun worriedly. At this time, they had to admit that no one present was a match for Asgard Master Yun, including the heroes of the 4 domains who entered the ruins through the Realm Gate. There were not many who could defeat Asgard Master Yun. Even Jin Shin's aura was faintly suppressed. Perhaps after this move, the one who survived in the end would have a great chance of reaching the realm of true self. At this moment, in front of Jin Shun, the sky god shadow had almost solidified into a physical body. It was like a real god crushing the world. A boundless power of the sky enveloped Jin Shin's head as if to crush him. Even this part of the world was distorted and deformed. Jin Shun stared ahead. The threat of death stimulated his nerves, causing his trembling body to reveal a kind of excitement. His face was full of battle craziness. He roared and stomped his feet. The mark of a divine pagoda appeared between his eyebrows. A 9-story divine pagoda descended from the void and enveloped his body, resisting the pressure of the sky god. The 9-story divine pagoda spun quickly, sweeping out surges of Emperor's light. Its volume continued to increase. It was like a giant pagoda that reached the sky. It extended infinitely upward, as if it had pierced through the firmament. The sky was blasted open, and there were rumbling sounds of collapse. This sword destroyed the god. The sword of imperial power in Jin Shin's hand floated out and pointed straight at the sky god. The will of the emperor was infused into it. Suddenly, the supreme emperor's sword erupted with a 1,000-foot-long platinum sword light. It was like a giant sword that could kill gods. With a thought, the divine sword pierced through the air and slayed the god. No matter how strong an ant is, it is still an ant. How can it fight against a god? Die, Jin Shun. Palace Lord Yun's 5 fingers smashed forward. The divine body in the sky let out a furious roar. It also clenched its fist and attacked. This palm seemed to be able to crush the entire sky. All things were destroyed. The 1,000-foot-long sword light was shattered and annihilated. Even someone as strong as Jin Shun, who had proven his way, was crushed by this clenching fist. He spat out blood, and the Supreme Emperor's sword fell with a sad cry. The incomparably terrifying palm in the sky closed into a fist. The towering divine body stepped forward and punched Jin Chen's body forcefully. A terrifying sound wave exploded in the void. The terrifying fist light was blocked by 90% of the divine pagoda. The will of the way in the sky continued to erode, and dense cracks appeared on the divine pagoda. The battle below had basically stopped. Everyone from the battle kingdom watched the battle between the emperor and the lord in shock. At this moment, Jin Shun was like an emperor who had fallen into a struggle and was about to die. He was in imminent danger under the god's spiritual fist. The princes and princesses of the battle kingdom all exclaimed. Countless eyes were fixed on the battle. It was simply a battle between gods. It was terrifying. That's right. Fall. At this moment, a voice sounded from somewhere. Suddenly, the terrifying sound of a sword whistled, shaking heaven and earth. A sword light that was as red as blood cut through the sky and ruthlessly pierced into the body of the sky god. The sword broke the ultimate bloodline imperial method of the cloud heavenly palace. It pierced through the dharma body of the god and appeared behind Palace Lord Yin. When Palace Lord Yin turned around in shock, he saw a face that did not look human. It was covered in scales. Under the ferocious dragon claws, the blood-red sword light was getting closer and closer. Palace Lord Yun's will of the way in the sky exploded wildly, trying to stop the blood-red sword light that broke in. However, his ultimate rule power of the way was broken by the sword as if it was nothing. Then an indescribable burning pain swept through his body and swallowed up his spiritual soul. No! Boom! An incomparably terrifying explosion sounded in the void. The huge body of the sky god collapsed, and Palace Lord Yun was turned into fragments together with it. At the moment of death, he, who was arrogant about his cultivation being invincible, realized that other than Jin Shun, there was another person who wanted to take his life. The threat of this person was even greater than that of Jin Shun. It was Li Chuji, the descendant of Dendi. Chapter 1764. The divine light disappeared, and the power of the will of the way in the sky dissipated. A mighty overlord from the middle world of the East Continent, Palace Lord Yun, had died. Qin Hao held the great void sword in his hand. Blood slowly flowed down his chest and arms. He took 2 deep breaths to calm himself down. Although it was a sneak attack, Palace Lord Yun was indeed powerful to be able to break through the body of the sky god with the burning rule and the indestructible rule. Jin Shin's bloodline of the divine pagoda was slightly inferior to Palace Lord Yun's last attack. At that moment, Jin Shun was injured by Palace Lord Yun's fist will and his divine soul cracked. He immediately recovered after landing. A shadow of a 9-story divine pagoda covered his body. The supreme Emperor's sword, which had merged with the sword's soul, floated in front of him, emitting waves of sword will to suppress his injuries. Everyone felt that Jin Shin's divine emperor will seem to have changed after the battle with Palace Lord Yin. It was ethereal, but there seemed to be some kind of true will in the void. Sect Master Tatian, Mo Luo, and the others were slightly shocked. Jin Shin's energy was extremely close to that of the grand patriarchs of the various clans. It seemed that he was about to break through. Prince Chun, this is a blessing for you. Hyuning chuckled. Jin Shin's cultivation had already reached the peak of the divine path, but he was still unable to step out of the realm. He must have been lacking something. Palace Lord Yun's attack helped him a lot, allowing Jin Shin to comprehend the essence of the true self in the battle. Don't disturb him. Everyone, follow me. Qin Hao put away the great void sword. No one could help Jin Shin's divine soul, but if he broke through to the true self realm, the injury would be nothing. Now, with the death of one of the heavenly cloud palace's monarch lords, the battles between the various forces had stopped. The heavens horizon, sky's shaking race, wind people, Lihua Manor, and the others had either died or fled. There weren't many who could still fight back. Qin Hao saw that only the battle between Zhang Yi and Bian was still ongoing. However, Bian was firmly suppressed by Zhang Yi, and he believed that the battle would end soon. Among the various clans, the Heaven-Shaking clan suffered the most casualties. In a previous battle with the Heaven-Trampling sect, they lost half of Emperor Yuan's powerhouses. After the battle with the Water Jade Holy Palace, almost all of their clansmen who entered the ruins died, including the Heaven-Shaking clan's lord, Yuan Tao. Not many people from the Heaven's Horizon escaped. When Mo Luo and the Heaven-Trampling sect's Monarch Lord launched a sneak attack on Old Taoist Lihua, Mo Xian led the 3 demon generals and joined forces with the Heaven-Trampling sect to kill almost all the people from the Heaven's Horizon and Lihua Manor. Not only them, but the evil spirit Shenghua also wanted to become a deity, but their methods and actions were different. The owner of the Artifact Palace is also creating a god, but he is not creating a supreme Dao warrior. Instead, he is creating a god in an artifact. Perhaps he did not have the time to complete it when he was alive. However, this divine object has merged with the void chains, borrowing the power of the primordial elements to absorb the power of heaven and earth. Following the owner's will, it has become a divine artifact. Qin had to not know how powerful the true power of the divine path was. After all, he had never fought with a divine level before. The art of immortal samsara was a true divine level technique. Judging from its power, this divine artifact was not as powerful as the Great Void Cauldron. If the Great Void Cauldron was compared to an adult, the divine artifact in the hall should still be in its adolescent stage. Oh my God, Mo Xian was shocked. If he had not experienced everything that happened in the Divine Palace, he would not have dared to imagine that there was someone in the world who could create a divine artifact. The void chains have merged with the divine object. Are you going to separate them? Su Jin asked. The primordial elements were so powerful. Since the divine object had completed its self-tempering, it did not need to rely on the void chains. That would be too wasteful. Smart. We have to take both the divine artifact and the void chains. Of course, we have to maximize their value and separate them. I have enough power to separate them. But Qin Hao looked at Mo Xian. At the moment of separation, I will merge the void chains into your life spirit, just like my red lotus fire. It will become a part of your power. Do you dare to try? Qin Hao told them the origin of the divine artifact and the primordial elements. Mo Xian knew how terrifying the will was. Merging with his life spirit was a great risk to his life. I'm willing to try. Mo Xian gritted his teeth and said, there is no such thing as a lord or subordinate here. If you are really willing, I will do my best to help you succeed. But if you're just following orders, then forget it. I don't like to force my own people. Oh, I forgot to mention one more thing. The golden sword aura on Wuk's body is the 10,000 elephant gold of the primordial elements. In addition, the life spirit of the wind elemental swordsman has also merged with the wind, including Li Wanji. The reason why they survived fatal injuries was because of the power of creation and regeneration of the Qinquan Earth. Qin Hao listed out his successes one by one. There were definitely dangers. Back then, when he fused with the Red Lotus Fire, the feeling wasn't any better than first flawless. But once he succeeded in fusing with the Red Lotus Fire, his strength was obvious. It was equivalent to being reborn. The Red Lotus was the fire, the divine item was the furnace, and the divine item was refined with the precepts. Ear-piercing screams came from the cauldron. Looking from the outside, the towering hull gradually turned the color of lava. It was as if it was being refined by the heavenly fire. The sky of the vast plain was red. Everyone felt an extremely frightening might of Tao. They all turned around and saw Jin Shun, who was sitting cross-legged, slowly opening his eyes. His pair of deep eyes seemed to be able to suck people in. When they looked at each other, Hyuning, Makamanji, and the other imperial lords, their sovereign spirits surged. An invisible pressure seemed to be pressing down on them. Even the imperial lords were unable to move. He had broken through. Above the Tao affirmation was the true self-emperor will. Congratulations. Mo Luo was, after all, an overlord of an imperial power force. He was very calm and was the first to recover from his shock. Congratulations, Prince Chun. Congratulations, Prince Chun. Everyone congratulated him one after another. He had stepped into the realm of proving way. From now on, Jin Shin's status in the East Continent was equal to that of the Grand Patriarchs. Jin Tao Sengoku's strength had increased tremendously. He was truly the overlord of the Western world. Ha, there's no need to be proud. I'm just one step faster than you all. Jin Shin laughed and waved his hand. He slowly stood up. At this moment, everyone felt as if a vast sky had risen in front of them. It was irresistible. Was this the true self-great emperor who had comprehended the emperor's true will? Now, you could do whatever you want in the ruins. Even if you bump into Commander Liu and Commander Tsin, you can still stand up proudly. Hyuning said humorously. What he said was true. Zhang Lu and Tsingang were just true self-great emperors. I could stand up straight, but my fists can't be as hard as theirs. Jin Shun was very sincere. Being in the same realm didn't mean that their combat strength was the same. For example, before he broke through, he was almost invincible in the realm of proving way. Even Palace Lord Yun of the Yuntian Palace, the #1 overlord of the Middle World, couldn't do anything to Jin Shun without using the ancient god bloodline will. However, after he broke through, it was a different scene. Even though he had mastered the Emperor's true will, he was the weakest among the true self-great emperors. He was definitely not a match for Zhang Lu and Tsingang. Why, Li Chuji and the others haven't come out yet? Jin Shin didn't want to dwell on this problem. He looked at the palace. Even if he was in an epiphany, he could still feel the changes on the plain. According to the time outside, about 10 days have passed. Hyuning said, I can't believe I've been in an epiphany for so long. Jin Shun was very dissatisfied. He felt that he had only been in it for half a day. Was his talent that bad? Boom! Crack! At this moment, a huge roar resounded through the heavens and the earth. The ancient palace finally couldn't withstand the consumption of the Tao flame and collapsed in front of everyone's eyes. Smoke and dust filled the sky. Let's go and take a look.